What does it take to simply disappear? To abandon a $90 million penthouse overlooking the San Francisco Bay? A tech CEO for a husband? And a life that appeared flawless to the entire world? Eleanor Vance did exactly that. At 5:59 on a Thursday morning, 8 months pregnant and carrying a single vintage cello case, she walked away from a painful truth she had been quietly compiling for nearly a year. She left behind a simple platinum wedding band and one line of music on a sheet of paper, a composition designed to shatter a titan's world and reset the future for everyone involved. But there was one variable no one's algorithm could have predicted: the ambitious lead engineer who was certain she was already co-authoring the next chapter. She had no way of knowing what was about to be unleashed. The CEO, who could build revolutionary artificial intelligence but couldn't maintain a relationship, began to glitch in ways his vast fortune couldn't debug. And the wife who vanished was about to prove that sometimes the most effective upgrade requires a complete system wipe. This is the story of a woman who remembered her own worth, a man who realized it far too late, and a rival who logged into a server she was not authorized to access. The chain of events that followed will shock you, inspire you, and maybe, just maybe, make you reevaluate what it means to be truly powerful. Stay with us, because the source code is only now being revealed. The Aura home integration system in the vast entryway softly announced the time, 5:59 a.m. On a Thursday morning, as the fog rolled in over the bay, Eleanor Vance descended the floating glass staircase of the Pacific Heights residence she'd called home for 6 years. One hand held the worn leather handle of the cello case, the other rested protectively over the curve of her belly, shielding the son she'd carried for 8 months. Their housekeeper, Maria, paused from polishing a gleaming chrome sculpture, her face etched with a sincere concern that went beyond her duties. "Leaving so early, Mrs. Vance?" she asked, her voice warm with a kindness Eleanor had grown to cherish. Eleanor gave her a small, real smile that Maria would replay in her mind for weeks. "I am. Thank you for everything, Maria. For all of it." A sense of closure lingered in her words, making the older woman pause, but before she could ask more, Eleanor was gliding through the enormous, silent, automated front door. A pre-booked autonomous vehicle waited at the curb, merging seamlessly into the early morning gloom, carrying her away from the $90 million view, away from the cold perfection of her life, and away from the man who was in love with her public image but couldn't handle her private reality. 3 hours later, Marcus Thorne shifted in the middle of their massive minimalist bed. His hand swept across the cool expanse of the mattress, expecting the familiar presence of his wife, but found only the empty, cold landscape of imported linen sheets. Luxurious and sterile. He sat up, a deep crease forming between his brows. In 6 years, Eleanor had always been up before him, the soft, melancholic notes of her cello practice usually drifting through their home, a gentle sound he hadn't truly listened to in years. The silence this morning was different. It was a deliberate, piercing void. "Eleanor?" His voice, which could command boardrooms and captivate investors, sounded weak and lost in the cavernous master suite. Nothing. Marcus got out of bed, a cold unease beginning to spread through him as he moved through the penthouse. In her music room, he saw that her prized 1741 Montagnana cello was gone from its climate-controlled stand, a small detail that triggered a massive system alert in his gut. Everything else was perfect. It was all so perfectly arranged, it felt more like a showroom for his company's technology than a home. Downstairs, the morning light cut through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the disturbingly still air. On the sleek obsidian desk in his home office, propped against the Tech Innovator of the Year award he'd just received, was a single sheet of aged, cream-colored sheet music. It was a clear reference to her former life as a principal cellist. His name, Marcus, was written across the top in her elegant, flowing script. He reached for it, his hands steady enough to ink a multi-billion-dollar merger, shook as he picked up the delicate paper. The message written below a single bar of music was lethally clear. I'm going to find the music I lost when I became your perfect accessory. Our son deserves a mother who has her own song. Placed beneath the note, resting on the desk's dark surface, was her wedding band, a simple platinum ring and now completely devoid of meaning. Marcus read the words again and again, his brain failing to process the input, caught in a loop of denial. Gone where? Why? What did she mean? Her own song. He commanded his home system, Aura, call Eleanor's mobile. The AI's calm voice responded instantly. The number you are trying to reach has been disconnected. He tried again. The same placid, digital response. Her best friend Clara, she would know something. Aura, call Clara Bellamy. The call went to voicemail, Clara's bright voice announcing she was on a month-long digital detox retreat in the Scottish Highlands, completely off-grid and unreachable until March. The intricate, strategic execution of it all hit him with the force of a denial-of-service attack. Marcus slid down to the polished concrete floor, his back against the leg of his desk, the sheet music crushed in his fist. For the first time in his life, he felt a fear that had nothing to do with market volatility or competitor launches. This was a deep, fundamental terror, the feeling of having his entire operating system violently erased. "Where is my wife?" he whispered to the silent, intelligent room. "Where is my son? Let me show you how the code became corrupted. Let me tell you about the perfect life that was, in reality, the perfect simulation. Let me tell you about an ambition so vast it corrupted every file it touched, and about a woman who loved a man so much she had to crash the whole network to save herself. Because sometimes the only way to build something new is to start from a clean install." 72 hours earlier, Eleanor had woken up in that same bed, alone. The panoramic view of the Golden Gate Bridge was a breathtaking screensaver for a life that felt increasingly like an app she couldn't close. She found Marcus's message not on a pillow, but as a transcribed voice note on her bedside tablet. "Pushing the beta with the engineering team tonight. Don't wait up. M. No good morning. No. How are you feeling? Not even an I love you, just the curt initial." 8 months pregnant, Eleanor moved through their automated home with a deliberate grace, a hand resting on her belly. Their son kicked, a small, tangible reminder that she wasn't completely alone. She made her own breakfast, a smoothie with fresh greens, just as her nutritionist's app recommended. "Good morning, my little duet partner," she whispered to her bump. "I suppose it's just you and me for the encore." Her tablet buzzed with a link to a tech industry blog her Aura system had flagged as relevant to her interests. The headline made her blood run cold. "Thorne and Sharma unveil the future of domestic AI." The main photograph was of Marcus on stage at a press event, looking powerful and charming. He was leaning in to share a laugh with a brilliant-looking woman in a sleek, modern dress. They looked so connected, so deeply in sync, that looking at the photo felt like an invasion of privacy. The caption identified her as Anya Sharma, his visionary lead systems engineer, Marcus's star programmer. Eleanor zoomed in on the image, her musician's eye for detail analyzing the composition, the proprietary way his hand lingered on the small of her back, the way Anya's focus was entirely on him, creating an impenetrable bubble for just the two of them. And that's when the final data point crashed into place. The night before, while testing a new feature on the Aura system, she'd stumbled upon a glitch. She'd asked the device to archive recent activity logs. Instead, it transcribed a raw audio file from his study. It was a hushed, intimate conversation between Marcus and Anya. This Carmel property is our real beta test, Anya, our future. And tucked into their conversation was a reference to a custom piece of jewelry, a gift for a .S to celebrate the launch. It was the last piece of confirmation she would ever require. Eleanor picked up her cup of herbal tea, her hand perfectly steady. She should have felt a tidal wave of fury, a crushing weight of betrayal. Instead, a quiet, profound exhaustion settled over her. It was the kind of weariness that comes not from lack of sleep, but from the slow, methodical deletion of trust. That was the final diagnostic, she would later say. The final error report, because I was done trying to debug a system that was fundamentally corrupted. I had stopped being the conductor of my own orchestra. She saw her reflection in a dark monitor screen. Designer maternity dress, perfect hair, understated makeup. She looked exactly like the wife of a tech mogul, a woman whose life was a feature in lifestyle blogs. Composed, flawless, and completely hollow. I had no memory of writing that score, she remembered thinking. That person was a user profile he built, filled with algorithms I never chose and permissions I never granted. But that profile was about to be permanently deleted, because Eleanor Hayes Vance had been quietly writing her exit code for over a year. In 72 hours, Mrs. Vance's account would be deactivated for good. Across the bay, in a minimalist apartment in Soma, Anya Sharma was on a celebratory video call with her mentor, a glass of expensive champagne in her hand. He's going to tell her the moment the acquisition goes through, Sloane said, her voice laced with unwavering certainty. She's the starter wife, the legacy he inherited. I'm the one who understands his vision, the one who sees the true scope of the media empire he's building. On her second monitor, a slideshow of photos showed Clara at press club dinners and charity auctions, always poised, always a little distant, a gentle smile that never quite reached her eyes. She has grace. I'll give her that, Sloane continued. But grace without a killer instinct is a liability. And a man like Arthur Lexington doesn't need another pretty photograph for the society pages. He needs a partner in the boardroom. She needed a co-conspirator who could tear apart a business plan and then command a room at a state dinner. Sloane swiped the digital portfolio away and opened a document named AL, Legacy Integration. It was structured like a 10-year corporate takeover, because to her, that's precisely what he was. Sloane had fought her way out of a forgotten burrow, leveraging scholarships and a ferocious intellect to claim her place in the brutal landscape of New York media. Arthur Lexington wasn't just a man she wanted. He was the capstone of an empire, the ultimate merger that would secure her own legacy. Her strategy was clinical. Phase 1, solidify her role as his indispensable strategic mind. As head of digital strategy, she'd be the only one he trusted to navigate the future. Convince him that no one else could see the board the way they did together. Phase 2, cultivate emotional dependency. Become his sole confidant for the crushing weight of his family's dynasty, a burden his wife, the quietly principled, former journalist, was never equipped to share. Phase 3, the Davos Summit. Cement their public persona as a formidable power couple. Phase 4, the conscious uncoupling. Frame herself as the steadfast ally when his marriage predictably fractured. Every empire requires a new queen. Sloane had no doubt it would be her. Sloane whispered to herself while creating a new private meeting invite. I am simply accelerating the inevitable. What Sloane could never have guessed was that Clara had already abdicated the throne of their Park Avenue penthouse months ago. She had already drafted her own escape plan, a way to trade the gilded cage for a life of quiet meaning. The role Sloane was meticulously plotting to usurp was already vacant, and the man she was targeting, he was about to implode in a way neither woman could ever have imagined. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's go back to the very beginning, to the day Arthur Lexington read an article by Clara Rossi and decided she was the next great voice he had to own. 8 years before Clara disappeared, she was an entirely different person. At 26, she was a tenacious investigative reporter for a small online news startup in New York, writing scathing exposés to make her rent while pursuing the stories that won her small but fiercely respected journalism awards. She argued with sources over minor details and ran on the adrenaline of a perfectly sourced story. Her tiny apartment was a chaotic mess of legal pads and interview transcripts. Her salary was laughable, and she had never felt more alive. On a crisp autumn evening, Clara was in a dive bar with her editor, a seasoned newsman named David. They were going over the final draft of a piece on city council corruption. A massive media conglomerate, a rival of the Lexington Group, had tried to kill the story because it implicated one of their major advertisers. "If you let them bury this, Clara, a real piece of truth gets silenced," David said, his face etched with concern. "Don't let them. What you have here is important." Clara tapped the printed manuscript between them. "They're not going to silence me," she promised. "A good story always finds the light." It did. She published it on her own platform. Clara stood in a packed university auditorium, presenting her findings and feeling the room hang on her every word. The story won a major local journalism prize. After, David enveloped her in a bear hug, his eyes shining. "See? You gave them something that mattered." She felt it deep in her soul right then, that pure satisfaction of holding power to account. That was her calling. That same month, still riding the high of her win, Clara was at a fundraiser for a journalism school. She wasn't a wealthy donor. She was the recent award winner the school was using as a showpiece. She wore a simple black dress, awkwardly making conversation with people whose cufflinks were worth more than her annual salary. That was when Arthur Lexington arrived. He was 32, the formidable new head of his family's legendary media empire, a New York scion who was dragging the institution into the digital age with ruthless efficiency. He had the sharp, assessing eyes of a man who had never lost a negotiation. While talking to a famous news anchor, his gaze swept the hall and landed on Clara. He cut the conversation short and moved directly toward her. The crowd seemed to instinctively make way for him. "Clara Rossi," he said. It wasn't a question. "Your series on the council was a masterclass in narrative journalism." His attention was so total it felt like it sucked all the air out of the immediate vicinity. "I'm Arthur Lexington." "Mr. Lexington," she replied, suddenly hyper-aware of the gulf between their stations. Her simple dress and his bespoke suit, the way the entire room's energy had just warped around him. "You have a powerful voice," he said, "but you're writing for the minor leagues." A spark of defiance flared in her chest. "Excuse me?" "You belong on the front page of the Lexington Post, backed by a global platform, not collecting plaques in a university hall." He said it with such absolute authority, as if mapping out a future she hadn't yet considered. Clara raised her chin. "And what makes you so sure I'm interested in the front page?" A genuine, rare smile touched Arthur's mouth. "Because every great writer wants their story to be read, don't they?" Not every writer's ambition is measured in circulation numbers, mister. She let her voice trail off. Lexington. Arthur Lexington. And I'd like to prove you wrong. Dinner. She knew she should say no. She should have recognized the danger, the offhand way he belittled her work, the assumption that she was just another talent to be acquired. But he was looking at her like she was the most important writer in the world, and after years of fighting for every byline, that kind of validation was a powerful drug. One dinner, she agreed. One dinner became two, then a week in London. It was a whirlwind, 6-month courtship that felt like a dream. Arthur introduced her to her literary heroes. He argued the nuances of her favorite columnists, and he listened, truly listened, to her story pitches. He gifted her a vintage typewriter, not jewelry, as if he understood the tools of her soul. He met her father, a retired history professor, in their modest Queens apartment and charmed him with his grasp of 20th century politics. As they left, her father gripped her arm. "Are you sure about him, Clara?" he whispered, a worried line between his eyes. "That world of his, it can edit people. Make sure you don't lose your byline in his." "He loves my byline, Dad," Clara insisted, believing it with every fiber of her being. "He sees me for who I am. Just make sure he's still seeing you in 5 years." 6 months after they met, Arthur proposed on the rooftop of the Lexington Tower, with the lights of Manhattan spread out like a kingdom below. The ring was an heirloom, once owned by a trailblazing female war correspondent. Clara said yes because she believed she was writing her own perfect headline. Their wedding was a small, elegant affair. Clara wore a classic satin gown. She carried a bouquet of white anemones and felt like she was stepping into a storybook. In the wedding photos, she is radiant, completely unaware that she was trading her career for a title, her sharp voice for something softer, more suitable, and infinitely smaller. The revision of a person is always subtle at first. Year 1. Arthur was closing a media deal in Hong Kong and was absent from the ceremony where Clara's series won a Pulitzer Prize. She accepted the award via a live feed in their cavernous penthouse, drinking champagne and wondering why the win felt so hollow. Year 2. Clara told Arthur she was going undercover for a story on labor conditions in the garment district. His response came from behind his tablet. "Why would you do that? The risk is enormous. You can run the Lexington Foundation's journalism grant program. You don't need to put yourself in the trenches." "The trenches are where the story is, Arthur," she tried to explain. "It's what I do." "You have a bigger impact on the world sitting next to me at these fundraisers," he countered. "Supporting the empire I'm building, that creates a more powerful legacy than one little article." Clara dropped it. She was tired from planning a benefit the previous evening and didn't have the strength for the argument. That is how a voice is silenced, by 1,000 quiet cuts. Year 3, she tried to launch a pro bono legal clinic for freelance journalists. Arthur was traveling, and when he finally heard about it, his comment was casual but devastating. "Darling, those little bloggers will just drain you. You were meant for a global stage." Year 4. Clara stopped pitching stories. Arthur stopped asking. Year 5, Clara found out she was pregnant. She told Arthur over breakfast, her heart fluttering with a fragile combination of terror and hope. His face lit up, but his words landed like ice in her veins. "Wonderful. An heir. Not a baby. Not our child. An heir." Another byline for the Lexington dynasty. A character whose story was written long before they would ever be born. 6 years in, Chloe had become a specter in her own home, a penthouse that felt more like an art installation than a place to live. She organized charity auctions, smiled for society pages, and faded a little more each day. The woman in the reflection was an artifact she no longer recognized. At 7 months pregnant, Chloe was searching their home server for old family photos when she found a password-protected folder. The password, Wrigley, the name of their first dog, brought a fleeting, painful smile. Inside weren't photos, but architectural blueprints and legal drafts synced from his personal cloud. Her blood ran cold as she read the title, Nursery Wing Postnatal Redesign. The architect was Victoria Blackwood, his star designer. She sat there in the vast home library he'd built for her, a place she never used, her old art history books gathering dust on the shelves. She didn't weep. The shock was too cold for tears. She closed her eyes for a moment, then opened a hidden partition on her laptop. Inside, a single project was labeled Contingency. That was a year ago. Since that night, Chloe had been planning her escape with the same precision she once used to curate a museum exhibit. She had mastered the role of the beautiful, silent piece in his collection, and now she would use that stillness to remove herself from the display entirely. Every single day, she moved $200 into a hidden account. Each visit to a gallery in the River North Art District, she'd buy a small print with her debit card and ask for cash back, always under the $100 limit that would trigger a notice. She tucked the crisp bills inside hollowed-out art theory textbooks, rolled them into the handles of old paintbrushes he'd never know she owned, and sealed them in archival bags hidden inside a crate of art supplies in their off-site storage unit. Julian never went there. He barely noticed her moving through their home. She opened a small savings account under her maiden name, Hayes, at a tiny credit union in Evanston, a suburb he only associated with the university he'd decided against. The teller, an older woman with sharp, knowing eyes, gave her a look of solidarity when Chloe requested, "This account is for me alone, my name only." "I understand completely," the woman said, her tone a quiet promise. She did all of her planning on a public computer at the Harold Washington Library, always using a privacy-focused browser, always meticulously deleting her history. She researched small, quiet towns in rural Vermont and the coast of Maine, places where Chloe Croft could simply evaporate, so that a woman named Eleanor Hayes could finally draw her first breath. She bought a prepaid phone with cash. She rented a small mailbox in a town west of Chicago she'd only ever seen from the highway. She used a contact from her old gallery days, a man who specialized in authenticating and discreetly moving art, to help her create the documents for a new life. She practiced the signature for Eleanor Hayes until it felt more real than her own. That signature became her purpose. The day she found out she was having a daughter, Julian's word, legacy, had felt like ice in her veins. Her daughter wasn't going to be a child, she was going to be an heiress, groomed to sit on foundation boards, not to be a person. Chloe would not let that happen. She packed one durable art portfolio and hid it behind a loose panel in their wine cellar. It contained a pair of sturdy boots, a worn cashmere sweater from before her marriage, the fragile ultrasound prints, her mother's antique locket, and a well-loved book of poetry. Nothing Julian had ever laid his hands on, and most certainly nothing that belonged to Victoria Blackwood. Using the untraceable phone, she sent a brief email to her older sister. "Hey, I'm finally taking that art sabbatical to New England we talked about. Going to be totally off-grid to find some inspiration. I'm fine, don't worry." Her sister, the only person who knew how to read her silences, would understand immediately. 2 weeks before she was set to leave, Chloe had her final ultrasound, the one Julian had promised he'd attend to review the forthcoming asset. She sat in the sterile beige waiting room, watching other couples. The men were focused on their partners, fetching water, their attention absolute. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from Julian's assistant. Mr. Croft has been pulled into a last-minute meeting with the zoning board. He will be unable to make it. He sends his apologies. It wasn't a message. It was a press release. The doctor's smile was professional and distant. Where's the excited father-to-be today? Building an empire, Chloe said, the words tasting like ash. He's always building something. The black and white image materialized on the monitor. You have a daughter, the doctor said, her voice softening. A very healthy and very active little girl. Chloe reached out and touched the screen, a single tear breaking free and tracing a path toward her temple. Hi, Thea. I'm your mom, and I promise you will be a life, not a lifestyle. That very night, as Chloe sat alone in their penthouse, watching the boats on Lake Michigan, Julian was having dinner with Victoria at a private table at a Michelin-starred restaurant. It was the same table where he had first described to Chloe the life he could build for her. Victoria wore a sharp, architectural dress, the color of steel. They spoke of structural load-bearing, of favorable tax incentives, and of a future that had no space for a wife and child. So, what's the schedule for the residential transition? Victoria asked, swirling a glass of scotch. The moment we break ground on the apex, the prenup is airtight. She gets the settlement and the condo in the settlement. And if she becomes difficult? Julian's smile was a thin, hard line. My legal team will make her life so miserable she'll be begging to sign. Victoria leaned closer, her voice low and sharp. I'm not her, Julian. I won't be running charities. I will be in the boardroom with you. I know, he said. That's the entire point. They touched glasses, a silent merger, completely unaware of the controlled demolition being planned 50 stories above them. That night, she got the final piece of the puzzle. Unable to sleep, she had wandered into his silent home office, a room she always avoided. Months before, she had given him a set of antique drafting tools for his anniversary, a gift he had politely ignored. On his desk now sat a massive, state-of-the-art digital drafting table, a recent gift from Victoria. On a whim, she turned it on. It connected to his cloud storage by default. She saw the master file for the Apex Tower was open. She clicked on the annotations layer, where designers could leave digital notes for each other. There, in stark red text, were comments between Julian and Victoria. They weren't about the building. V. What about the C factor? J. Postpartum. Cleaner legal strategy. She'll be too exhausted to put up a real fight. V. And the nursery plans? J. Your design is greenlit. We begin work the week after she's moved out. The betrayal was no longer a fear. It was a project file. Chloe's former life as an art curator, a woman who could see the truth beneath the surface of a painting, had been suppressed and painted over during her marriage. She had almost forgotten that woman existed, but seeing their cool, clinical notes plotting her own obsolescence, that woman woke up. She didn't need a private investigator. Julian had left the minutes of his own treason. It was brutally clear he would never protect her. Her story was set. The final piece was hung. In 24 hours, Chloe Croft would be gone, and the perfectly curated life they presented to the world would have an empty frame. Saturday night, 10 p.m., Chloe stood in the vast, silent kitchen of the penthouse, 7 months pregnant. She was performing one final, quiet installation. She took a single, small framed painting and placed it on the marble mantelpiece. A chaotic, colorful abstract of their first tiny apartment in Wicker Park, a piece she'd painted herself, years before the first 9-figure deal. She had dismissed the staff for the weekend, needing the profound silence for her next act. The air was still, carrying only the scent of polished steel and the faint, distant sound of the city. Her hands were perfectly steady, a curator's calm, as her mind took a final mental photograph of the view. The string of lights on Lakeshore Drive, the low hum of the city from 50 floors up, the crushing weight of her diamond ring, a flawless, brilliant cut lie. Julian came home at 10:30, not smelling of another woman's perfume, but electric with the buzz of a successful negotiation. He was on his phone, his voice sharp as he crossed the living room. He didn't see the painting. Victoria, confirm the demolition permits are filed. Yes, first thing Monday. The investors get the final timeline at 9. Chloe stood by the fireplace, silent. Julian finished his call and finally saw her. He glanced toward the mantel, his eyes sweeping past the small painting without registering it. Is everything all right? He asked, his attention already returning to the screen of his phone. She watched him, letting the silence expand in the room. Finally, she nodded toward the frame. I found this, she said, her voice calm. From Wicker Park. Do you remember? A flicker of annoyance crossed his features. He was searching his memory for a file that had long since been deleted. Oh, right. A long time ago. He had no memory of the joy, of the cheap pizza, of the plans they'd made in that cramped little room. He had forgotten it, or more precisely, he had raised the property to make way for new development. Chloe looked at his face, capturing it one final time. The hard set of his jaw, the cool gray of his eyes reflecting a data stream, the complete and total absence of her in his world. This was the only goodbye she needed. This was the image that would push her forward as she walked out the door. After typing for a few more seconds, Julian turned and disappeared into his home office. For a series of calls with his engineers in Seoul, Ava took the photograph from the mantel, moving through the silent penthouse like a phantom, bidding farewell to her beautiful, empty cage. She paused at the nursery door, looking at the climate-controlled smart crib and the developmental stage-approved mobile. It was a room designed for peak performance. I'm sorry I couldn't make this place a home for you, my little wren, she whispered to the life she carried. But I promise you'll have something better. You'll have a mother who actually sees you. At 1 a.m., Ava set her plan in motion. She retrieved her packed duffel from its hiding spot. Her hands began to tremble. Every sound was amplified, the whisper of the waterproof fabric, the quiet snap of a buckle, the wild, desperate drumming of her own heart. The smart display on Liam's nightstand suddenly lit up. Ava froze, her body rigid. If he woke up, if he saw her standing there with a bag, the dream of freedom would shatter. The screen cast a blue glow on his sleeping face. It was a notification from Serena. Ethel is live. We are live. A small rocket emoji pulsed beside it. Liam shifted, murmuring in his sleep. Ava, you up? The drowsy question was the final chain she had to break. Just cross-referencing the server logs, she whispered, her tone a carefully constructed fiction. The baby's kicking. There's an app for that, Julian mumbled, his voice muffled by the pillow. Go to sleep. He shifted, already drifting back into a dreamless state, entirely confident that the predictable world he had coded would execute without error. It was an impossibility in his data-driven universe that a variable like his wife would choose to deviate from her established pattern. Eleanor remained motionless for what felt like an eternity, timing his deep, rhythmic breaths, waiting for the frantic overclocking of her own heart to cool down. Then, with practiced stealth, she slipped the encrypted hard drive into her worn leather satchel, waiting for the quietest hour before dawn, when the city's ceaseless noise would finally buffer. At 4:30 in the morning, Eleanor changed into faded black jeans and a durable canvas field jacket from her days as a reporter, an outfit that made her anonymous in a city of ghosts. She tucked her hair into a knit beanie, her face scrubbed clean of the makeup she wore like a mask. The woman reflected in the darkened glass of the window was someone she finally knew. Not Eleanor Vance, just Ellie. She took a final tour of the sterile, minimalist apartment. She allowed herself one last, heartbreaking glance into the high-tech nursery. Her fingers grazed the polished chrome of the smart crib her son would never sleep in, beneath the data-driven mobile of holographic stars that would never twinkle for him. Downstairs, she walked to the sprawling granite countertop in the kitchen. She placed the wilted basil plant from the hydroponic garden, its leaves dark and limp, in the center. Beside it, she laid down a single, antique typewriter key. On the main screen of the kitchen smart hub, she left a single, encrypted file that would detonate his entire life. The file was named data_corruption.zip. She placed her wedding ring, a sleek, biometric smart ring that tracked her every vital sign, next to the key. The custom device, a symbol of a corrupted code, reflected the city's distant, flickering lights. It was a cold, empty signal. Ellie took only one thing from that life: a small, battered reporter's notebook. Not to remember Julian, but to remember the woman she had been, inquisitive and relentless, before she had allowed herself to become another one of his data points. "I won't raise my son in a digital cage," she whispered toward the silent master bedroom. "I'm taking him somewhere he can write his own story." At 4:45, Ellie stepped into the silent, automated elevator. The satchel felt impossibly light, carrying only the essentials for her new life. The elevator descended, each floor a quiet deletion of Mrs. Vance, and a step closer to Ellie Sullivan. The lobby, a gallery of glass and steel, was deserted, except for the night security guard. It wasn't their usual guard, Arthur, but a younger man named Ben who didn't know her routines. He glanced up from his tablet, a look of surprise on his face. "Mrs. Vance, you're out and about early." Ellie's pulse spiked. She hadn't accounted for this, for a human error in her perfect plan. "Just restless," she said, her voice even. "Decided to drive up to the coast to watch the sunrise." Ben's eyes moved from her face to the rugged leather satchel. She saw a moment of cognitive dissonance in his expression, a feeling that the data didn't match the profile. "Should I signal for the automated car to come around?" "No!" The word was too loud, too sharp. Ellie softened her expression with a practiced smile. "No, thank you. A friend is picking me up. I didn't want to wake Julian. He has that big keynote speech." Ben held her gaze for a beat too long. Ellie's heart hammered against her ribs. He knew. He had to know something was wrong. But then he just gave a slow, deliberate shrug. "Okay then. Have a good one, Mrs. Vance." A generic sedan, summoned via a privacy-focused app on a burner phone, slid to the curb. Ellie pushed through the massive, heavy glass doors Arthur would have held open for her, and stepped out of her smart home and into the cold, damp air of a Boston morning. She didn't look back. The bus driver gave a tired nod as she hoisted her duffel bag up the steps. Conversation wasn't expected on the 4:45 a.m. route heading north. The terminal at South Station was a vast, echoing space of marble and steel, occupied by cleaning crews and a few solitary travelers. Ellie kept her beanie pulled down low, her gaze averted from the dozens of security cameras. At the ticket window, the agent was a young man with exhaustion etched around his eyes. "One way to Burlington, Vermont," Ellie said. The agent tapped at his screen. "That's a bit of a ride. You sure?" Ellie felt a jolt of pure panic, a baseless fear that Julian's face would flash onto the news ticker above the agent's head. Or worse, his corporate security detail would appear to escort her back to her gilded cage. "Positive," she replied. Her voice firm, she paid with cash. Crisp bills she had earned from secretly freelancing as a fact-checker for an online publication. No digital footprint, no name, no data trail. The paper ticket felt like a passport to a new self. At a kiosk, she saw his face on the cover of a tech journal, Julian Vance, engineering a flawless future. In the photo, she stood just beside him, a beautiful, silent partner in his grand design. She pulled the beanie lower and turned away. A young man wearing a startup hoodie did a double take. "Hey, you look a lot like..." Now boarding for the 5:15 express to Burlington at Gate 5. Ellie moved quickly, her body still adjusting to the new life growing inside her, the duffel bag knocking against her knee. She didn't breathe easily until she was in her seat, near the back of the bus, tucked away by the window, obscured by the reflection of the terminal lights and a lifetime of being underestimated. The bus pulled away from the curb at 5:31 a.m. The precise moment, a pre-scheduled email from her burner account sent a fake itinerary for a flight to London to Julian's executive assistant. As the Boston skyline receded into the gray dawn, Ellie felt a tectonic shift inside her. Not a system crash, but a reboot, a slow, quiet loading of a program she thought had been deleted. The woman in the adjacent seat, older, with the kind, sharp eyes of a librarian, saw the single tear that escaped and traced a path down her cheek. "Running from a faulty program, dear?" Ellie quickly brushed the tear away. "Is it that obvious? 40 years ago, I ran from a tenure committee that thought my ideas were too radical," the woman said with a wry smile. "It was the best research trip I ever took." "What if this is a catastrophic error?" Ellie whispered, the words barely audible. The woman's smile deepened. "And what if this is the first line of code in a story that is completely your own?" The bus moved north, carrying Ellie Sullivan toward a future that was both unwritten and liberating. Behind her, Mrs. Julian Vance was already a corrupted file. In their smart penthouse overlooking the harbor, Julian Vance slept, wholly unaware that his perfectly optimized world had just encountered a fatal exception. He would wake in an hour to a cold bed and an even colder reality. He would find the dead plant, see the antique key, attempt to open the encrypted file named data_corruption.zip, and begin a free fall that none of his algorithms could predict or prevent. But Ellie wasn't thinking about that. She thought about her child, stirring within her, safe, wanted, and finally offline. She thought about a future she would build herself, under her own byline. She thought about a small-town newspaper in Vermont she'd found online that was looking for an editor, one that had a small apartment available for a woman expecting a child, with no digital history and a new name. Mrs. Vance had been a convincing simulation, but Ellie Sullivan was about to go live. The bus chased the sunrise, and Ellie watched the sky slowly brighten on the first day of her new life. Julian's biometric alarm activated at 6:52 a.m. The blackout shades retracted with a silent, smooth motion, revealing the overcast Boston sky. His hand swept across the cool, high thread count sheets, a programmed gesture from 6 years of marriage, searching for the familiar warmth of Eleanor's body. Empty space, cold sheets. He sat bolt upright, a flicker of confusion on his face. In their entire life together, Eleanor had never deviated from their shared morning protocol. She was his 5 a.m. espresso, the perfectly steamed milk settling into the dark liquid just so. She was the starched collar of his shirt, the reassuring weight of his custom-made watch. He expected her to be there, a quiet, graceful presence in their morning ritual. But today was different. "Clara?" His voice, a command on construction sites and in boardrooms, was tentative in the cavernous silence. Nothing. Arthur Sterling slipped from the sheets, pulling on a cashmere robe as he moved through their sun-drenched Park Avenue penthouse. Her music room was still. The grand piano gleamed, untouched. Her collection of antique sheet music was perfectly aligned on the shelves. But the cello, her prized amati that always leaned in the corner by the window, was gone. The absence was a structural flaw in the room, a void that threw everything off balance. "Clara, my love," he called again, a thread of real urgency in his tone now. The apartment remained tomb silent, a stillness that felt like an ending, not a pause. Arthur descended the marble staircase, his steps echoing. In the grand living room, where the city skyline served as their art, he saw it. Placed squarely on the center of his favorite Eames chair was her metronome. It was ticking, a slow, steady, deliberate beat. And next to it, her wedding band, its diamond catching the morning light, cold and alone. He drew closer and saw a single folded piece of manuscript paper tucked beneath it. The title, written in her elegant hand, was one word: Coda. "I have gone to find my own music. Please do not follow. Our child deserves a mother who can play her own song." He read the words written below the musical staff. It was a simple, haunting melody he'd never heard before his mind, which could calculate the precise stress tolerance of steel, beams, and the future value of a city block. Couldn't process the message. It was an equation with variables he'd never accounted for gone where her own music. She was Clara Sterling, his wife, the mother of his heir. She couldn't just divest from their life. He grabbed his phone to call her. Her mobile was on the nightstand, powered down. He dialed her best friend, a violinist with the Philharmonic. The line rang once. Before a crisp text message appeared, "The number you have dialed is no longer taking unsolicited calls. Any inquiries for Miss Anja Petrov will be handled through her agent." A professional firewall. Perfectly constructed, Julian called his head of security. "Marcus, did you see Mrs. Sterling leave yesterday afternoon? Mr. Sterling around 3 p.m.? She took a car service. Not the Bentley. Said she was heading to a chamber music workshop in the Berkshires for the week. She had her cello case and one small overnight bag. She seemed very composed. Sir, quite at peace." Compose, that word, landed like a wrecking ball in Arthur's gut. Not frantic, not tearful, not conflicted, composed as if this were a performance she had rehearsed for months, as if she had executed this final movement with the flawless precision of a concert cellist. Arthur sank into the leather sofa, the sheet music crinkling in his fist for the first time since a rival developer nearly bankrupted him in his 20s. He felt a profound structural failure, a collapse that had nothing to do with zoning laws or leverage buyouts, and everything to do with a foundational part of his life being deliberately and permanently removed. "Where is my wife?" he whispered to the sprawling, silent apartment. "Where is my son at 9 o'clock in the morning?" Isabel pushed open the penthouse door with her own key. She was holding 2 coffees and wore her ambition like a Savile Row suit. "Arthur, honey." "You'll never guess the offer we got on the Meridian site." She stopped cold, seeing him by the window, still in his robe, looking like a man staring at the rubble of his own building. In all the months of their affair, she had never seen him undone. Arthur Sterling was a monument, solid and immovable. This man was a ruin. "What is it?" Arthur held out the crumpled manuscript without a word. Isabel took it, her brow knitting in confusion, before her eyes lit with a flicker of triumphant understanding. She quickly arranged her features into a mask of deep concern. "Coda, what on earth is that supposed to mean?" "Gone, she left. Took our child. She just ended things." His voice was a monotone, a dead signal. Isabel sat beside him, her mind already rezoning the future and assessing new development opportunities. This was it, the demolition she had been waiting for. Clara was gone, clearing the site for Isabel to become the new Mrs. Sterling. She just needed to manage the project flawlessly. "Oh, Arthur, the baby, is he safe?" Should we call the authorities and tell them what my pregnant wife left a piece of cryptic sheet music and vanished? She's a grown woman. Isabel placed a hand, tipped with a blood-red manicure, on his arm. Arthur has... She seemed fragile lately. The hormones during pregnancy can cause such profound emotional shifts. You know, even before the baby arrives, Arthur sees the explanation like a safety harness. It was a logical reason for an illogical event she has been. Distant quiet, we need to handle this with discretion. For her sake, if the press caught wind of this, they could destroy her. They might call her unstable. The words were carefully chosen, designed to protect Isabel's future as much as his own image. If the world knew Clara had left him, they would ask why they would find Isabel. They would call her a homewrecker, not a partner. Arthur nodded, his eyes fixed on the new skyscraper he was building downtown, oblivious to the predatory glint in her gaze. You're right, we'll handle this internally. What neither of them knew was that, in an office downtown, the head of the New York Landmark Conservancy was opening an anonymous manila envelope. It contained blueprints and internal memos from Arthur's firm, detailing a confidential plan to demolish the historic Orpheum Theater. The documents that proved Arthur Sterling's company was planning to illegally circumvent preservation laws, the documents that would soon prove that Arthur's wife hadn't just left him. She had declared war on his entire legacy. At 10 a.m., Arthur was in his home office on a secure line. His head of security had never heard him sound so stripped of authority. The architect of a 1,000-foot tower sounded like a man in a hole. Get me Sullivan, the best private investigator in the city. I don't care what it costs by noon. Sullivan was sitting in Arthur's office, a former NYPD detective with the weary eyes of a man who'd seen every kind of lie. He examined the sheet music with a practiced calm, while Arthur paced your wife, leased a post office box in her maiden name, Rossi, 18 months ago. She's been receiving royalty checks from a classical music publisher in Vienna. Small amounts at first, then larger ones for original compositions. Total deposits over the last year come to just under $80,000. Arthur stopped pacing. What she bought, a used station wagon from a private seller 3 weeks ago, paid cash. It was spotted on a traffic camera yesterday on the Taconic State Parkway. Heading north, she wore a simple scarf and sunglasses and paid a courier to deliver a separate, empty cello case. To a music school in Boston, Sullivan swiped on his tablet, showing a grainy photo of Clara driving, her expression focused and calm. Mr. Sterling, your wife didn't have a breakdown. This was an emigration. She has been quietly rebuilding her former life for over a year. One single credit card purchase in her name for a professional-grade audio recorder. That's it. Total liquid assets. When she left were approximately $100,000, Arthur stared at the skyline. Sullivan, we cross-referenced her compositions with performance schedules. Sir, we found this from a small arts journal in Vermont. A critic praised a new guest cellist at a summer festival named Clara Rossi. The review mentions her achingly beautiful original work. He slid an iPad across the desk, a photo of a woman, her hair pulled back, holding a cello and smiling a genuine, unburdened smile. She looked nothing like the impeccably styled Mrs. Sterling. Mr. Sterling, your wife didn't just leave, she reclaimed her own name. This was a masterwork of quiet rebellion. She's been composing this escape for at least 18 months, Mr. Sterling. The words hit Arthur like a demolition permit for his own life for 18 months. While he'd been building his empire and sleeping with Isabel, Clara had been composing her own future. She had lived in his penthouse, hosted his dinner parties, and carried his child, all while planning her own overture. Find her, Arthur commanded, his voice low and dangerous. I don't care what it takes. Find my wife Sullivan, his investigator, looked at him with an expression bordering on pity, sir. When someone goes to this much trouble to get free, they rarely want to be found, and the courts, they have a tendency to favor the mother. Especially a pregnant one leaving a high-pressure marriage. I gave her everything. Did you give her a world she could recognize as her own? The question hung in the air, sharp and unanswerable. Over the next week, Arthur's world began to crumble. Sullivan's investigation traced the intricate melody of Clara's new life, the small-town bank accounts, the musician guilds she'd joined under her maiden name, the trail of sold-out performances at small venues that led from Massachusetts to Vermont. Before going cold, they were always one step behind the music. Arthur stopped going to the office. He ignored the board's frantic calls about the Orpheum Theater scandal and let Isabel's text go unanswered. He spent his nights in his chauffeured sedan, circling the block around Chicago's Symphony Center, where they'd listened to a Brahms concerto on their first date. He would just stare at the grand silent building, as if his sheer will could conjure her image inside. An old usher, sweeping the steps one evening, saw him. "You look like a man who's lost his music," he said, not unkindly. "My wife. She's gone." The old man gave a slow, knowing nod. Sometimes the soloist has to leave the orchestra to write their own song. The words haunted Arthur. He began to see his marriage with a painful new clarity, one not warped by the scale of his own towering ambition. He remembered how Clara's passionate talk of sonatas and composition had slowly dwindled to nothing. He recalled how she, a Juilliard-trained concert pianist, had become just another beautiful object in his minimalist penthouse apartment. She had lost her resonance, her tempo, until she was just a faint, sad melody in their own home. He had done that. He had taken a woman who was a symphony of emotion and passion and tried to arrange her into a simple, predictable tune that fit into his portfolio of assets. He had taken her extraordinary gift and walled it up inside his cold, relentless drive, and the casual cruelty of a man who had stopped listening to the person sitting right beside him. On day 19, his partner Marcus found the first real clue. It wasn't digital. It was a wire transfer for the sale of her Steinway grand piano, sent to a niche collector in a tiny town in Michigan's Upper Peninsula. Arthur was in his helicopter within the hour, desperate for any piece of the composition that was his wife's escape. Copper Harbor was a town of 90 people, a place where a new face was a major event. The owner of the general store remembered Claire, a quiet woman, very pregnant. She'd bought a topographical map of the Keweenaw Peninsula about a month back, saying she was looking for a place where you could hear the quiet. Arthur sat in his polished Bentley on a street lined with rustic, historic storefronts and slammed his hand on the leather dashboard. He just screamed until his voice was gone, until he had let out a sliver of the rage and terror and profound emptiness that was hollowing him out from the inside. He was always chasing her echo, always a step too late, always 1,000 miles from where she had just been. 3 weeks ago, Isabella Rossi was making the penthouse her own. A new Italian leather sofa here, a state-of-the-art home automation system there. Isabella was methodically erasing any sign that Clara had ever lived in the sky-high apartment. She met with an architect, describing a vision of brutalist chic, polished concrete, dark metals, and integrated technology, a shrine to ruthless power. Mrs. Vance's sentimental clutter is no longer aligned with the brand, she told the architect with a dismissive gesture. And once the formalities are handled, there will be a new Mrs. Vance. What Isabella didn't realize was that Marcus Thorne, Arthur's partner, was observing her from his own office across the Chicago River. He was quietly cross-referencing expense reports and private elevator keycard logs, noting how Isabella had systematically become Arthur's gatekeeper, his only strategic advisor. Marcus had always been Arthur's most loyal defender, but now he was forced to be his investigator. And the web of influence he was uncovering threatened to bring their entire development empire crashing down. The 31st day dawned. It was the day of the groundbreaking ceremony for the Vance Tower, Arthur's magnum opus. He was supposed to be on that stage, the undisputed king of the Chicago skyline. Instead, he looked like a man haunting his own legacy. He hadn't bothered to shave, his custom-tailored suit was wrinkled, and his eyes were dark, hollowed-out holes of despair. The investors and city officials in the front rows started to whisper. Marcus pulled him into a sight trailer. "Arthur, we can call this off. Blame a union dispute. You're in no condition for this." "I'm fine," Arthur snapped, his voice thin as glass. "Let's just put the damn shovels in the ground." The presentation began, the air thick with tension. Arthur stood before a massive, gleaming rendering of the tower, an icon that looked like a shard of ice piercing the clouds. "Ladies and gentlemen, the Vance Tower will reshape." His focus shattered. The speech on his note cards became a meaningless jumble of letters. The only words he could see were from Clara's last note. "Our child deserves a father who knows the difference between a foundation and a cage." "Arthur?" Marcus's sharp voice came through his earpiece. "The anchor tenant agreement, are you with us?" He stumbled back from the podium, the bright television lights, making the construction site seem to tilt. Hundreds of eyes were on him, a mix of confusion and high finance impatience. "We were all so sorry to hear about Clara," a well-known journalist called out from the crowd, her tone attempting sympathy. "Is there any news?" Something deep inside Arthur finally fractured. He stood there, a raw, broken sound that might have been a laugh, echoing through the microphone. "You want news on Clara? I'll give you news on Clara." His voice cracked, climbing into a desperate, frantic pitch. "She's gone. She vanished. I have no idea where she is. I don't know if my own baby is safe. I don't know why she left me. I know nothing." He tried to steady himself on the lectern, his knuckles turning white. "I had everything. I built an entire world for her, and she... The sobs took him then, hard, violent spasms that shook his entire frame. The sound of his raw, unfiltered grief echoed across the future site of his greatest triumph. Arthur Vance, the titan of Chicago real estate, collapsed against the lectern and wept like a lost child. "I don't even know if they're okay. What if they're in danger? What if the baby..." The 150 people in the audience were shocked into utter silence. They had come to witness the birth of a billion-dollar landmark. Instead, they were watching the complete and total public disintegration of its creator. In the VIP tent, Isabella watched with a cold, building rage. This was not the man she had tied her future to. This sobbing, pathetic mess was not the titan she had gambled her entire career on. He was a liability. Marcus walked onto the stage, his voice calm and commanding. "We are experiencing a power issue with the sound system. Ladies and gentlemen, the ceremony is concluded. Please make your way to the reception." The audience shuffled away, their hushed gossip replacing the expected applause. Only Marcus remained, watching as Arthur sobbed, utterly destroyed by the absence of the woman he had treated as his most prized acquisition. "I loved her, Marcus," Arthur choked out, gasping for air. "I loved her." "No?" Marcus said, his voice quiet, but as sharp as a surveyor's nail. "You loved owning her. You loved that she was brilliant and beautiful, the perfect artistic complement to your cold, concrete life. You never loved Clara, because you never once bothered to actually listen to the music she was trying to make." The words were both a verdict and an undeniable truth, and they demolished the last piece of Arthur Vance's carefully built identity. That evening, he checked into a private wellness center on the shores of Lake Geneva for burnout, exhaustion, and what the admission form gently described as an acute personal crisis. Isabella made an appearance performing the role of the concerned, capable partner. But when Arthur looked at her, he saw a distorted reflection of his own ambition, a person who coveted the empire he had built, not the man himself. It was precisely what he had done to Clara. "Leave," he said, his voice empty of all emotion. "Arthur, I'm here to manage the portfolio until you're better." "You're not her. You will never be her." Isabella's mask of composure finally cracked, revealing the cold resentment underneath. "She abandoned you. I am the one who is here, holding your world together." "I know," he replied, "and that's the problem. You are here for the buildings." She left because of the man who valued his blueprints more than her. Isabella walked out of the clinic, the future she had engineered with such ruthless precision now turning to dust. And somewhere on the coast of Maine, more than 900 miles away, a woman named Claire felt her baby kick. She laid a hand on her stomach and smiled at the gray, churning ocean, completely unaware of the real estate empire burning down in her absence. Her focus was entirely on the new life she was creating. One quiet choice, one salty breath, one determined step at a time. 3 weeks after Clara Vance disappeared from Chicago, a pregnant woman got off a bus in Rockland, Maine. She was 7 months along, bone-tired, and the roll of cash in her pocket felt terrifyingly small. The journey had been a miserable crawl across the country, full of long nights and lonely humming rest stops. But she had made it. Claire Morgan was here. She took a small taxi into the coastal town, which was huddled in a harbor where pine-covered hills met the sea. The air smelled of salt, diesel, and drying seaweed. Quaint, clapboard houses lined the narrow streets, and a fleet of lobster boats bobbed in the bay. It all felt quieter, older, and infinitely more real than the glass towers of Chicago. Claire was turned away by 3 different inns before the harsh reality became clear. They all required a credit card to hold the room. Cash, she was quickly finding out, made people nervous. But she couldn't check in without a driver's license they could photocopy, not without leaving the exact digital footprint she had spent weeks meticulously erasing. "I'm sorry, miss," the last innkeeper had said, his tone sympathetic but resolute. "It's a liability thing for our insurance." Catherine found a splintered bench overlooking the harbor, her palm resting on the swell of her belly, trying to calm the panic rising with the tide. She had strategized for so many contingencies, but this simple, bureaucratic hurdle had never occurred to her. The baby fluttered, a soft kick against her ribs, and for the first time since she'd fled, Catherine had absolutely no idea what came next. That night, she slept in the aging sedan she'd bought with a wad of cash from a college kid in a Seattle suburb. The cramped driver's seat was an instrument of torture for her aching, pregnant body. A wave of nausea mixed with the cold, salty air seeping through the car's window seals. It was a dreadful, endless nightmare. She wept silently, her hand held protectively over her stomach. "I'm so sorry, my love," she whispered into the fogged-up interior of the car. "I am so sorry. We're going to figure this out. I swear it." On the 3rd morning, exhausted and at her breaking point, Catherine saw a small diner on the waterfront. "The Salty Dog," read the faded, hand-carved sign. Taped to the glass, beside a list of the day's fresh catches, was a handwritten note: "Restrooms for paying customers, but a dry seat is always on the house." She entered, her only plan to use the bathroom, to reclaim a single moment of normalcy. The diner was warm and smelled of strong coffee and fried bacon. A man with a deeply lined face and a worn fisherman's sweater watched her approach the counter. "You look like you've been dragged in with the tide," the man said, his voice a low rumble. "Just passing through," Catherine lied softly. "Could I please use your restroom?" "End of the bar, to your right, dear. Go right ahead." In the small, spotless bathroom, Catherine stared at her reflection. Her face was ashen and her eyes were dark with fatigue, but she saw something else emerging. A resolve. She looked like a person, not the polished, perfect trophy she had been pretending to be for years. When she came out, the man had a steaming bowl of clam chowder waiting for her at the counter. "Looked like you could use this. It's on me." That simple act of kindness was what finally shattered her composure. The tears she had been holding back for days began to flow freely down her face. "Thank you." The man glanced out the window, his eyes finding the dusty sedan parked by the docks. "How many nights has that car been your bed, kid?" Catherine's head shot up. "How could you know?" The old man started wiping down the gleaming chrome of the coffee machine. "Look, I spent 30 years fishing the Bering Sea before I opened this joint. I know what a person running on fumes looks like. It's got a certain scent to it. Name's Silas." "Catherine," she whispered. "Catherine Reed. Is that your real name?" Catherine said nothing. Silas just grunted. "Right. Well, you got a roof over your head tonight?" "Not yet. I'm trying to find one. I've got a room upstairs. It's not the Ritz, but it's warm and it locks. It's yours if you can handle the breakfast rush. The work will pay for the room and board." Catherine stared at the gruff fisherman, offering her the exact lifeline she needed. "Why would you do this for me?" "Because about 40 years ago, my engine died in a squall off the Aleutians," he said, his gaze distant. "And a stranger on a crab boat risked his own neck to tow me in. Just returning the favor." His eyes met hers, tired but clear. "Are the cops after you?" "No. A man who believes he owns me is." "That's all I need to hear," Silas said with a firm nod. "Welcome to Port Blossom, Catherine." The apartment above the diner was simple, containing only a bed, a small desk, and a window that looked out over the fishing fleet and the vast, gray expanse of the Pacific Ocean. But it was safe. It was the first place that was truly hers in nearly a decade. Catherine cried herself to sleep that night. But for the first time in a long while, the tears were of pure, unadulterated relief, of a fragile, flickering hope. The weeks that followed settled into a new rhythm. Catherine learned to brew coffee by the gallon, flip pancakes, and make small talk with the fishermen who came in before dawn. She was slowly absorbing the cadence of life in the coastal town. The locals were watchful, but not intrusive, taking note of the fine wool of her simple coat, her quiet, almost regal posture, and the gentle curve of her growing belly. "It's a funny thing about a place this small," remarked Martha, the woman who ran the local post office one afternoon. "We all know a little bit of everybody's story, but we're also real good at knowing which pages to leave unturned. It's clear you're running from something, but it's just as clear you're not the one who caused the trouble, and that's enough for us." At night, the old terrors would surface. Marcus, finding her, the cold, sterile quiet of their San Francisco penthouse, the thought of him taking their son, of locking her back inside the gilded cage she had mistaken for a home. She'd wake up with a jolt, her hand flying to her stomach, just to feel the solid, reassuring presence of her son, to know he was still there, still safe, still hers. Martha heard her one night and brought up a thermos of chamomile tea. "The ghosts don't shout so loud with the ocean roaring," she said softly, "but they'll whisper for a good long while. I had a few of my own. It just takes time to believe they can't reach you here." "What if he finds me?" Catherine whispered, Honey, you're a pregnant woman who disappeared into the Oregon mist. That's like trying to find one specific drop of rain in a thunderstorm. You're safe. In her second month, Catherine met Lena at a small potluck for expectant mothers at the town hall. Lena was 7 months along, with a booming laugh and a personality as colorful as her knitted sweaters. Your first? Lena asked, plopping down in the chair next to Catherine's. Yes. Yours? Number 3. The husband's a long-haul trucker, so I'm basically a single mom half the year. He decided his destiny was the open road, not changing diapers full time. My mother says it's for the best. Catherine let out a small, quiet laugh, a sound that felt unfamiliar. I'm on my own, too. Lena's eyes were sharp but kind. Escaping a bad tide? Is it that obvious? Honey, I'm a quilter. I see the patterns. That little watch you wear costs more than my car. Your accent is pure Pacific Heights, and you jump every time a fishing boat sounds its horn. Lena's smile was warm. But don't you worry, I'm not one to pry. We've all got a trunk full of yesterday's baggage. After the potluck, they started taking walks on the beach, talking for hours about bizarre cravings, the overwhelming fear of raising a child alone, and the sheer work of starting a life over from scratch. It was the most honest human connection Catherine had felt in years, the first time she felt like a person instead of an exquisitely maintained possession. You've got a good heart, Cat, no matter what came before, Lena said one day. You should stay. I think I might. In her third month, with her belly now round and prominent, a pipe burst in the diner's kitchen during a sudden, unseasonable frost. Silas called Finn O'Connell, the volunteer fire chief, who was also the town's only reliable plumber. Finn showed up in a mud-splattered pickup, wearing a worn Carhartt jacket, with calm eyes and a quiet capability that instantly soothed Catherine's frayed nerves. He fixed the pipe, then noticed Catherine struggling to lift a heavy crate of potatoes. You shouldn't be carrying that. Here, let me get it. Catherine's immediate response was to protest that she was fine, but there was a simple decency in his tone that made her relent. Thank you. As he worked, Finn spoke in easy, measured tones. He was born and raised in Port Blossom. His high school sweetheart had passed away from an illness 5 years prior, leaving him to raise their daughter, Chloe, by himself. He carved beautiful, intricate sculptures out of driftwood in his spare time and seemed to be related to half the people in town. I'm carving a little sea otter for Lena's new baby, he mentioned. I could carve one for yours, too. No charge. Every new baby in this town deserves a proper welcome. Catherine's eyes welled up, a combination of late pregnancy hormones and the profound shock of such unprompted kindness. Why would you do that? Finn just offered a small smile. It's how we are here. We look out for our own. That's what being a town is really about. 2 weeks later, a storm that the old-timers called a once-in-a-hundred-years event slammed into the coast, washing out the only highway connecting Port Blossom to the rest of the world. That night, Catherine's water broke. It was 2 a.m, the contractions were powerful and close together, and she was completely terrified. She grabbed the small emergency radio Silas kept in the kitchen. It's happening. I'm on my way. Just breathe. But the storm surge had flooded the streets, making driving impossible. Even Finn's emergency vehicle couldn't get through. Lena finally arrived on foot, wearing hip waders, a beacon in the driving rain. All right, Cat, look at me. We can do this. Martha heard the call on her scanner and came over from the post office. I helped my sister deliver her youngest on their farm during the '96 flood. Can't be all that different. A few minutes later, Finn appeared, having waded through the waist-deep water. My wife, we took one of those birthing classes. I remember most of it. I can help. And so, Catherine Reed gave birth on the floor of a small room above a diner during a historic storm, surrounded by three people who, in just a few short months, had become her family. Jessica coached her through each wave of pain. David boiled water and rounded up every spare towel in his small clinic, and Ethan was a grounding force, his low voice a steady anchor through the storm. At 4:16 in the morning, as the nor'easter threw sheets of rain against the windows and the wind roared off the Atlantic, Leo Evans was born, 6 pounds, 9 ounces. Flawless, vibrant, and sheltered from the world. Charlotte held him, overwhelmed by a wave of joy so fierce it was a physical ache. "Hello, my beautiful boy. Hello. You're safe now. Mommy's got you." Jessica's eyes were wet with tears. "He's perfect, Charlie." Ethan came in holding a small, intricately carved wooden lobster boat he had just finished. "Welcome to Port Blossom, little guy." David placed a comforting hand on Charlotte's shoulder, his professional demeanor softening. "What's his name?" "Leo. It means lion-hearted, and it feels solid." She looked at her small circle of friends. "He's already braver than I could ever hope to be." "Kid, you just delivered a baby during a power outage in the middle of a nor'easter without so much as an aspirin," David said gruffly. "I'd say you've got the lion-hearted part covered." The next 6 months were the most peaceful of Charlotte's life. She worked in her small pottery studio, with Leo sleeping soundly in a carrier against her chest. The town had, without a single word, adopted them. Casseroles and fresh chowder would appear on her porch, along with bags of outgrown baby clothes and endless offers to watch Leo. Jessica's daughter, Lily, was born 6 months after Leo. The two new mothers learned to navigate the chaos of parenthood together, forging a connection deeper than any Charlotte had known in her polished New York City life. They pushed strollers along the rocky coastline, spent cool evenings on Jessica's porch, and built a new world founded on community and resilience. Ethan was a constant, gentle presence, bringing her the best of his lobster catch, helping her stack firewood for the kiln, and reading board books to Leo. One evening, gathered around a bonfire on the beach while Leo slept, Ethan turned to her. "I don't know what you were running from, Charlie, but I don't think it can touch you out here." They were so close, she could feel the warmth radiating from his arm. He shifted just an inch closer, and Charlotte felt the pull, the sense of safety, the powerful urge to just lean in. But she pulled back. "Ethan, I can't. I'm still married. It's not simple." "I can wait," he said, his voice as steady and sure as the tide. "As long as it takes." "Why are you so kind to me?" "Because," he said, watching the embers float up toward the star-filled sky, "some people are worth waiting for." On Leo's first birthday, it felt like the entire town of Port Blossom gathered at the community pier for the party. Lily took her first wobbly steps toward Leo. David had baked a cake shaped like a giant lobster. The town librarian gave Leo a hand-knit sweater. Jessica told a story she'd invented just for him. Ethan was showing Leo how to skip stones across the calm water of the cove. Even at 1-year-old, Leo was more interested in how the smooth, flat stones tasted than in throwing them. Charlotte watched him with Ethan, her heart swelling with a love so profound it felt like a physical presence. That evening, as she gently rocked Leo to sleep in her small cottage, she hummed a quiet lullaby. "Mama," Leo murmured, his very first word. Charlotte clutched her son tight, silent tears of pure happiness tracing warm paths down her cheeks. "Yes, my love. Mama is right here, always." She believed she had finally found it, a place to belong, a real home, a life of quiet purpose. She was certain the past was a distant ghost, left nearly 3,000 miles behind, buried under a new name and a life built on the simple honesty of shaping clay, not upholding an image. But in New York, in a sleek glass-walled office overlooking Central Park, a sharp-eyed lawyer named Sloane was scrolling through her customized news alerts. An old, persistent search for a dormant name had suddenly pinged. An article from a small Maine arts syndicate detailing the winners of the New England Crafters Award. The photo showed a woman with stunning auburn hair, proudly holding a uniquely glazed ceramic vase. The facial recognition software confirmed what Sloane already knew. It was unmistakably Charlotte Thorne. Sloane picked up her office intercom. "Marcus, I think I've found her." Charlotte's carefully crafted quiet world was about to be torn apart, because the past, it seems, never truly stays buried. It just waits for an invitation. 2 years after Charlotte disappeared, Marcus Thorne sat in his penthouse, surveying the empire he had built and the personal life he had destroyed. He hadn't touched a drop of alcohol in 18 months. He had appointed a new CEO to run the daily operations of Thorne Dynamics, removing himself from the corporate battlefield. He was, as his therapist called it, auditing the catastrophic failure of his marriage. He was finally confronting the reasons a woman would walk away from a life of infinite luxury just to get away from him. The process was brutal, forcing him to see his crippling need for control, the way he wielded money like both a sword and a shield, and the profound emotional neglect he had always disguised as ambition. He'd filled journals with letters he knew he could never mail to Charlotte, filled with apologies that rang hollow, even to him, and questions he no longer had the right to ask. "I thought giving her everything was the definition of being a good husband," Marcus admitted. "But I never gave her the one thing she actually wanted. I never even asked her what that was. And what do you think she wanted? To be seen, to be his partner, not his most prized possession." Marcus's voice was ragged. "I displayed her like she was the crown jewel of my tech portfolio. Now she's gone, and all I have is this empty apartment and the crushing weight of knowing I personally demolished the only authentic thing in my life." His phone buzzed at that very moment. Sloane's name glowed on the screen. Marcus's heart hammered against his ribs as he answered. "Tell me." "Port Blossom, Maine. She has a son. He looks to be about 2 years old. His name is Leo." Marcus's carefully reconstructed control disintegrated. "Are you positive?" "The award registration, sir. It has his birth date." "Her pottery studio was incorporated 9 months after she left." "What's the play here, Marcus?" Catherine, his head of public relations, spoke in her usual calm, strategic tone from across his massive Manhattan office. She mouthed the words, "Do not be impulsive." But Marcus Thorne was no longer listening to reason. That was his son. Somewhere on the coast of Maine was a little boy who had his eyes, a life he had been completely cut out of. "Get me the address," he barked to his head of security on the phone. "The studio's name, the alias she's using, who she's with. Get me everything." "Marcus," Catherine interjected, her voice dangerously sharp. "We've been through this. A reckless move is the worst possible thing you can do. You are not in an emotional state to handle this." But Marcus had already ended the call, pulling up schedules for private jets to Portland on his monitor. 2 years of mandated therapy, of rebuilding his public image, it was all turning to ash. "That's my son. I've missed his entire life. I am ready." He was not ready. 2 days later, Marcus sat in a black SUV across the street from a rustic, charming studio called Tidal Clay. His security team had been brutally efficient. Charlotte was now Charlie Evans. She had a small business, a role in the community, a new life, and a new man. Marcus watched as Charlotte came outside, holding a little boy's hand, smiling at something a man in rugged work boots was saying. The man had a kind, weathered face and an easy comfort with her that made Marcus grip the steering wheel until his knuckles were white. Then he saw the little boy's face, Charlotte's warm auburn hair, but his own unmistakable piercing gray eyes. The child pointed a tiny finger at a lobster boat, bobbing in the harbor, and shouted with glee, "Look, Papa Ethan!" The world buckled under Marcus's feet. His son called another man Papa. He followed them on foot as they walked toward the town docks, keeping a careful distance. He saw this stranger lift his son onto his broad shoulders, saw Charlotte watch them with a genuine, carefree smile he hadn't seen on her face in years. They looked like a family, a perfect, salt-of-the-earth coastal family, the kind he had only ever seen and scorned in magazines. That evening, in the stark, minimalist luxury of his hotel suite, Marcus shattered 2 years of sobriety with a $500 bottle of whiskey and a call to his most aggressive litigator. "Draft the paperwork. I want sole custody, immediately. Marcus, we need to be strategic. A mother who leaves before the child's birth and establishes a stable home. Family court will see that very favorably. This isn't a simple case of parental abduction. I don't give a damn how it's seen. She is living under a false name. She concealed the existence of my legal heir. I have the money, the power, and the most feared legal team in the country. She sells clay pots from a shack. Get me my son." The lawyer on the other end let out a long sigh. "I'll start the process. But Marcus, I am warning you. This kind of scorched earth litigation, it has a tendency to burn down everything and everyone. Just get it done." The next morning, Marcus walked into the pottery studio. A woman with friendly eyes and a clay-dusted apron looked up from behind the counter. Her smile was open but cautious. "Can I help you?" "I'm looking for Charlie Evans." The ice in Marcus's voice made the woman's welcoming expression evaporate. "And who may I say is asking?" "Her husband." Charlotte appeared from the back room, a little boy named Leo, clinging to her jeans. And then she saw Marcus. The entire world seemed to screech to a halt. Every trace of color drained from her face as she instinctively swept Leo up into a fierce, protective hug. "Mommy," the boy whispered. "Who's that man?" Lily's small voice picked up on the chill that suddenly filled the room. "Sarah, would you mind taking Lily to get a hot chocolate? Right now." The woman, Sarah, immediately understood the danger simmering in Oliver's gaze. "Absolutely. Come on, sweetie. Let's go find one with extra marshmallows." Lily started to protest, but Mommy is... Sarah was already steering her toward the cafe next door, leaving Amelia and Oliver alone in the suddenly silent art gallery. The space vibrated with the weight of 10 years together, 3 years of painful distance, and the unbridgeable gulf that now separated them. Oliver broke the silence first. "Hello, Amelia." "Stop," she whispered, her voice strained. "You lost the right to use that name. What are you doing here, Oliver?" "I came for my daughter, the one you hid from me." Amelia's eyes flashed with anger. "I didn't hide her. I saved her." "Saved her from what? A father who could have given her the world?" Amelia let out a short, bitter laugh. "You wouldn't have given her the world. You would have acquired it for her. Another asset for the Sterling Group portfolio. Did you even know I was expecting a girl? Did you remember my delivery date? Or was it just another entry in your calendar? That's unfair." "Unfair?" Amelia's voice trembled with a fury she'd bottled up for years. "You missed our final specialist appointment for a hostile takeover in Singapore. You were with your lead analyst while I was at home, sick and alone. Don't you dare lecture me about what's fair." Oliver placed a sleek tablet on the reception desk, a legal notice glowing on its screen. "This is a formal petition for custody. I'm suing for full parental rights." The gallery floor seemed to drop out from under Amelia's feet. "You can't be serious." "I am. You committed identity theft. You engaged in parental kidnapping. My legal team's monthly retainer is more than this entire town's annual operating budget. What do you have? A struggling artist and a fake last name." Amelia's hands shook, but her voice was steel. "I have her. I have Lily. She has no idea who you are. She doesn't need a ghost in her life. She calls another man her father. My daughter calls another man her father because Mark has been here. Mark is the one who teaches her to paint. Mark is the one who builds sandcastles with her on the beach. Mark is her father in every way that counts." Oliver's face was a cold, indifferent mask. "Not according to the laws of New York. Biologically, she is a Sterling, and she is coming home to Manhattan with me. Over my dead body. I'll see you in court, Amelia." He turned on his heel and walked out, leaving Amelia standing in the ruins of the life she had so carefully built. Her knees gave out, and she sank to the floor, gut-wrenching sobs shaking her body. Sarah rushed back in, kneeling beside her. "What is it? What did he do?" "He's here," she wept. "He found us. He's going to take Lily. He's going to take my little girl." The official summons was delivered a few days later. It demanded that sole physical and legal custody be awarded to Oliver Sterling, that the child be immediately relocated to New York City, and stated that Anna Cole would be granted supervised visits only, pending a psychiatric evaluation. The petition cited parental alienation, fraud, and unlawful flight to evade jurisdiction. A major business journal broke the story online. Tech magnate Oliver Sterling discovers missing wife in coastal Oregon. The article, which was clearly planted by Oliver's public relations team, painted Amelia as an unstable and deceitful woman who had run away. The story poisoned the small coastal town against her almost instantly. She was living a lie. That wasn't even her real name. At the playground, other parents would steer their children away when Amelia and her son arrived. The community center, where she volunteered, received angry phone calls. Her landlord served her with a 30-day eviction notice. Her new partner, Mark, and his family were her only allies. But to everyone else, she was an outcast. Amelia started packing boxes, ready to run again. "And where will you go this time?" Mark asked quietly. "I don't know. Somewhere he can't find us." Mark took her by the shoulders, his grip firm. "His private investigator found you because you used an old credit card one time, Amelia. There's nowhere left to run. You have to stop running." "Then what do I do?" "You fight," Mark said, his voice resolute. "You stand your ground, right here, and you fight for your son." His sister, a young lawyer named Jessica, entered with a worn-out briefcase. "My little family law practice is about to take on its first pro bono case." Amelia stared at her, completely bewildered. "What do you mean?" "For the last 3 years, I've been handling local disputes and wills. But my old mentor, he's now a senior partner at the firm that represents Sterling's biggest competitor. He owes me a big favor. So, you can stop packing, and we can start preparing our defense." In the weeks that followed, Jessica and her mentor worked tirelessly. They gathered documents, deposed witnesses, and built a timeline of Oliver's staggering emotional abandonment. The local doctor provided records showing Amelia had attended every single prenatal visit alone. Mark and several other townspeople agreed to testify to her character and unwavering dedication to her son. Slowly, as the truth began to surface, the town started to realize that Amelia wasn't a villain. She was a survivor who had escaped a gilded cage. The custody hearing was held in the small county courthouse. Oliver arrived with a team of 5 lawyers in perfectly tailored suits. Amelia's entire legal team consisted of Jessica, armed with a single, determined-looking legal pad. Oliver's lead attorney began with a devastating opening statement. Your Honor, Oliver Sterling is a devoted father who was robbed of the fundamental right to know his own son. He is the victim of a calculated and cruel act by a woman who vanished, created a false identity, and has spent 2 years systematically erasing him from his child's life. We are here today to restore his rights as a father. The hearing's purpose, he argued, was to correct a profound injustice. Witnesses testified about Oliver's recent change in priorities. His executive coach spoke about his journey toward work-life balance. A board member from a charity he funded praised his new commitment to family. A child psychologist detailed the unparalleled opportunities a child would have under Mr. Sterling's care. The case against Amelia seemed insurmountable. The secret bank account she opened before she left, the apartment she leased under a false name, the birth certificate where the father's name was left blank. A photo of her smiling with Mark was presented as proof she had callously moved on. At the end of the second day, Amelia whispered to Jessica, "We're losing him." Jessica squeezed her hand. "This is only day 2. Trust the process." On the third day, Jessica called her witnesses, Mark, the town doctor, and the owner of the gallery where Amelia worked. They all painted a consistent, powerful picture of Amelia as a loving and resilient mother who had built a stable, happy home from scratch. Oliver's lawyers objected constantly, arguing that personal anecdotes did not change the facts of her deception. Finally, Amelia was called to the stand. "Miss Davies," Jessica began, deliberately using her maiden name, "why did you leave your husband?" Amelia looked directly at Oliver, her voice strong and clear. "Because, in his world, I was just another beautiful object he owned. I was a footnote in his life, and I refused to let my son be born as a footnote too." She then described the slow, painful disintegration of their marriage. The specialist appointments he skipped for board meetings, the thinly veiled affair with the lead architect on his new corporate campus, and the chilling indifference of a man who had stopped seeing her as a person long ago. Jessica presented Oliver's own travel records, which confirmed he was out of the country for 8 of Amelia's 10 prenatal appointments. His phone log showed only 3 text messages about the pregnancy over 9 months. Credit card receipts from luxury suites in various cities completed the picture. "I didn't leave to punish him," Amelia said, her voice echoing in the quiet courtroom. "I left to save myself and to save my child from a lifetime of profound emotional emptiness." Oliver's lawyer was brutal in his cross-examination, hammering on the lies, the assumed name, and the theft of a father's bond with his son. But Amelia didn't waver. "I used my mother's family name, and I supported us with money from a trust my grandfather left for me. I have not touched a single penny of his money from the moment I walked out. That is an excuse, not a justification. I pleaded with him to come to the ultrasounds, but a quarterly earnings report was always more important. And Mark was there. He was there because my son needed a father. Leo calls him Dada because Mark is there every single morning and every single night. That is what a father does." On the 5th day, Jessica called a surprise witness. Robert Hawthorne, Oliver Sterling's mentor and the retired co-founder of his first company, entered the courtroom, and all the confidence drained from Oliver's face. "Mr. Hawthorne, what is your relationship to Oliver Sterling?" "He is the son of my late best friend. I have known Oliver since he was born." Robert then described the all-consuming ambition of the Sterling dynasty, telling a story of how Oliver's own father had a heart attack in his office and refused to go to the hospital until the markets closed for the day. Damien had missed his own product launch, countless milestones, and even his father's final hours, all for the sake of securing another round of funding. That emotional firewall was the secret to his success in Silicon Valley. When Damien first found out about Noah, Richard said, his voice thick with disappointment, he didn't say, "I'm going to be a father." He said, "I need you to manage a new data point. We have a projection anomaly." That one sentence captured everything about the man he had become. Damien stared at the man who had been his mentor since his first startup, his expression a glitch of shock and betrayal. Richard would not meet his gaze. Suddenly, Damien shot to his feet. "Your Honor, I have something to say." His lawyer hissed, "Damien, sit down now. Stick to the script." But Damien was done with scripts, with algorithms, with the fight. He's right. Richard is right about everything. He looked at Elena as though truly seeing her for the first time since they had met. "I didn't lose a wife. I corrupted our source code. I didn't lose my son. I never earned the security clearance to have him." His voice began to shake. "You were right to run. I would have optimized him, just as I optimized what we had." The courtroom was filled with a profound stillness. In the back, Katarina Rostova, the venture capitalist, watched in disbelief. She had attended to witness Elena's marginalization, to see Damien secure his legacy. Instead, she was watching him initiate a total system failure, admitting to everyone that his entire life had been a hollow success. "I came here to take my son back to Palo Alto," he said, his voice almost inaudible. "But that is not the optimal path for his development." Damien spoke directly to the judge. "Your Honor, I am retracting my petition for primary custody. I am not attempting to take Noah from his mother. I am hoping to be granted beta access to becoming his father, if she will allow it." He glanced at Elena. "And if she denies access, I will understand the firewall." The judge called for a recess. When she returned, her decision was resolute and direct. Joint legal custody will be established. Primary physical custody is granted to Elena Torres. Damien Vance will be granted graduated visitation rights, beginning with supervised access and progressing to unsupervised weekends after 1 year of documented, consistent participation in family counseling and parenting workshops. All child support will be managed through a trust for Noah's future education. She then fixed her gaze on Damien. "Mr. Vance, your son does not know you. Fatherhood is built with your time, not with your term sheets. You have a chance to create a real connection. Do not delete it." Elena wept, tears of profound relief cascading down her cheeks. Damien just nodded, accepting the judgment. The venture capitalist, who had come to see Elena's defeat, slipped out of the courtroom, her own strategic investments now in ruins. The war had ended. The quiet, arduous task of rebuilding was about to begin. The playroom at the community center had the faint scent of antiseptic and crayons. A social worker named Maria sat on a tiny plastic chair, scrolling on her tablet. She was the court-appointed supervisor for Damien Vance's inaugural visit with his son. Elena hovered by the door, a painful knot of anxiety in her stomach, unable to bear watching, but too worried to leave completely. Damien showed up precisely on time, holding several large bags from a futuristic toy store. There was a programmable robotics kit, an augmented reality story projector, and a tablet loaded with custom learning apps. Noah, who was now 2, saw the tall man in the expensive blazer and immediately clung to Elena's leg. "No," Noah said firmly. "My Dada." Elena knelt to her son's eye level. "This is Damien. He's your—" She struggled to find the right term. He's your bio dad. I have Dada. Dada Liam." The words struck Damien like a system crash. With all his influence, all his capital, his own son had just dismissed him with 3 simple words. Maria looked up from her screen. Mr. Vance, ditch the hardware. Get on the floor. Damien was completely bewildered. And do what? Just be present. That's the protocol. So Damien, in his $2,000 suit, sat down on the worn-out alphabet mat, surrounded by mismatched blocks and scuffed toy trucks, feeling utterly ridiculous. Noah paid him no mind, trying to jam a circular block into a triangular hole. That one looks like a compatibility issue, Damien offered quietly. Noah eyed him with caution. My blocks. Can I show you how they connect? Damien waited. Okay. For the next 50 minutes, they sat on the floor, one set of large, programmer's hands guiding a tiny pair on a wooden tower. Damien found himself humming and explaining the principles of a strong foundation, and was shocked by the unfamiliar gentleness in his own voice. Noah let out a sudden giggle, a bright, clear sound that felt like it mended a critical bug in Damien's corrupted soul. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Damien felt a sliver of warmth. When the hour was over, Noah gave a tiny wave. Just a quick wiggle of his fingers, but it felt like a truce. He laughed, Damien told his therapist, his voice thick with emotion. He actually laughed with me. The therapist offered a knowing smile. Because you were there. Keep being there. For the next 3 months, Damien was present every Tuesday and Thursday for 4 hours, supervised. He learned how to make goofy robot sounds, how to construct magnificent block castles, only to watch them get gleefully demolished, and how to accept that Noah was more captivated by the cardboard box than the $600 miniature drone it contained. He sold his Palo Alto glass house and bought a simple 3-bedroom house in a suburb of Boulder, its walls soon becoming a gallery for Noah's crayon masterpieces. He ran his tech empire by phone and video call, and was stunned to realize he didn't miss the fire of the boardroom at all. He never missed a therapy session, learning how to listen instead of giving commands. He joined a local parenting group where he was the oldest dad by 2 decades and the only one who had ever led a Series B funding round. Why are you even here? A young mother asked him once. You could hire a team of nannies. Because I have to learn how to do this myself, he replied, the honesty raw in his throat. You can't outsource being a father. By the 6th month, he had earned unsupervised day visits. He would drive into Boulder to pick Noah up from the small apartment Elena rented above a used bookstore. They'd go hiking by the creek or visit the science museum, and sometimes they'd just stay home and experiment with new Lego designs. Your towers aren't as wobbly anymore. Builder Damien, Noah announced one Saturday. Builder Damien. It wasn't Dad, not yet, but it was a title, a name he was slowly earning. Damien wept in his car on the drive back to his quiet house before calling his therapist. He called me Builder Damien. How did that make you feel? Like I was finally handed the manual to a system I thought I'd never understand, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to learn it. Elena watched his transformation from a careful distance. It would have been simpler to cling to her fury, but she couldn't ignore the steady, authentic change. He came to Noah's preschool science fairs and sat on a tiny chair next to Liam, the 2 men who loved her son, forging a quiet, respectful truce. He's not the man he was, Liam observed one afternoon, as they watched Damien patiently show Noah how a simple pulley works. People can change, Elena said, if they want it badly enough. Does that make up for what he did to you? No. But it changes what happens from now on. Liam took her hand. Elena, we've been taking this slow for 3 years. I love you, and I love that little boy as if he were my own. I want to be your husband and his father, but I have to know if you're ready to move forward. Elena looked at the kind, steady man. He had shown up in the middle of a blizzard with a generator, built the bookshelves for her home office with his own hands, and had been her steadfast support every single day, without asking for anything in return. "Yes," she whispered, "I'm ready." 3 years after the divorce was finalized, Elena and Liam were married on a hill overlooking the Colorado mountains. Noah, clutching the rings in a small wooden box, served as the best man. A small group of close friends were there, and Damien sat in a chair next to his partner, Chloe, a warm-hearted data scientist he'd met at a local fundraiser. He watched them say their vows with an unforced smile. At the laid-back reception at a nearby brewery, Damien found Elena. "Thank you," he said softly. "For what? For not blocking my access? For giving me a chance to earn my credentials in his life?" Elena smiled. "You did the earning, Damien. You just kept showing up. That's all it ever really takes." Noah ran over, grabbing a hand from each of them. "Dads, come build." 2 dads, both present, both earned, both loved. Elena thought of the woman she had been, pregnant and hiding in a motel room, terrified of what lay ahead. She thought of giving birth in a new city, supported by a man who became her family. She thought of the long journey from Elena Vance to Elena Torres, from being a tech mogul's wife to being her own person, from a glass penthouse overlooking the San Francisco Bay to a messy, wonderful, real freedom in the heart of the Rockies. She had found it, not a perfect life, not a simple one, but an authentic one. And an authentic life, she now knew, was priceless. 3 years after the divorce, Katerina Rostova stood across the street from Elena's nonprofit, the Anchor Project, trying to muster a sliver of the cutting confidence she once wielded. She wore a simple coat from a department store, a universe away from the designer pieces of her past. Her hair, once a beacon of expensive salon work, was now its natural shade, streaked with gray. Her nails, once flawless, were bitten and short. Her career came to a screeching halt the day Marcus Thorne, the titan of Silicon Valley, made a single phone call and had her blacklisted. In the insular world of tech journalism, the story went viral. The reporter who tried to trade an exposé for an engagement ring, who weaponized an affair, who meddled in a power marriage. She was radioactive. She tried to sue Marcus for professional damages, but her lawyer just sighed. For what? He ended a relationship with you after you committed a colossal ethical violation. You don't have a case. Her life savings evaporated into legal bills. She lost her sprawling loft in Soma, sold her collection of vintage synthesizers for next to nothing, and eventually had to retreat to her parents' house in an East Bay suburb she'd spent 2 decades escaping. She got a job writing painfully cheerful marketing blurbs for a mobile app developer, describing new emoji packs with a vacant expression. The woman who was almost the next Mrs. Thorne was now getting paid per word to praise digital stickers. But that morning, she saw Eleanor's face in an architectural journal. Preservationist Eleanor Vance wins Landmark Heritage Award. Eleanor looked confident, brilliant, and healed. She was everything Chloe had once aspired to be and had personally tried to burn to the ground. Eleanor stepped out of her design studio, holding the hand of her son, Leo, now 5 years old, who was excitedly describing how to build a rocket out of cardboard boxes. She stopped cold when she saw Chloe. "Leo, sweetie, go inside with Sarah. Mommy will be right in." The boy scampered inside, and Eleanor folded her arms, her face a carefully constructed mask of neutrality, as she confronted the woman who had attempted to demolish her life. "Eleanor, please, just 5 minutes." Eleanor's gaze was like steel. "You have 60 seconds. Chloe's story came out in a frantic, disjointed mess. The blacklisting, the career exile, the soul-crushing failure. I lost everything. And you want me to feel bad for you? No. I want you to understand. We both were after the same thing." Eleanor let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "We wanted absolutely nothing in common. We both wanted to build something, Chloe insisted, to be more than just girls from the suburbs. You took the high road, the honest way. I looked for a shortcut. You chose to systematically tear down another woman's life to claim what you wanted. That's not a shortcut, Chloe. That's a controlled demolition. Chloe's eyes filled with tears. I know. I get that now. And I am so profoundly sorry for it all. The silence hung heavy in the cool Bay Area air. Eleanor remembered the courier delivering the sealed case to their penthouse. Inside wasn't the antique survey maps she was expecting, but a detailed architectural model of a different penthouse, with a tiny 3D printed plaque inside that read, Our Future, M and C. So why are you in Sausalito? I saw you in that journal. You're thriving. You have this incredible life. You designed yourself with your own talent. I just needed you to know that I finally understand. What you did took more real strength than any takedown piece I ever published. Eleanor studied this shadow of a woman, a pale version of the formidable rival she once knew. There's a nonprofit a few blocks from here. They teach coding and design to underprivileged kids. They need someone to manage their fundraising and PR pro bono. Chloe just stared at her. What? It is volunteer work. But if you manage to build something real for them, I will write you a letter of recommendation myself. Why on earth would you help me? Because someone helped me when my world was rubble. And because you are not too old to write a new code for yourself, if you actually mean it. Chloe's tears finally spilled over. I don't deserve that. No, Eleanor agreed, her voice flat. You do not, but do it anyway, not for me. For the next kid who feels like they are on the outside looking in. Help them build something amazing instead of trying to tear it all down. Eleanor walked away, leaving Chloe clutching a flyer for the Code Forward initiative. 3 weeks later, Chloe stood in a cramped office, presenting a multi-page strategic plan she had put together on a computer at the public library. The director reviewed it carefully. Miss Reed, this is phenomenal. It is data-driven, ambitious, exactly the vision we have been lacking. Thank you. I want this to be a place where kids can design their own future. Eleanor Vance sent you to us. She said you were a project worth investing in. Chloe's throat felt tight. She was far more gracious than I had any right to expect. Then earn that grace. Chloe looked down at the plans, at the blueprint for Code Forward. A place to start over. Okay, she whispered. I will earn it. At a neighborhood potluck that weekend, their sprawling, cobbled-together family was all there. Sarah's bandmates and their partners, Eleanor's colleagues, the parents of Leo's friends. Marcus and his new wife were there too, standing quietly by the barbecue. It was a new kind of structure, one they had all built together. Eleanor watched them all from a checkered picnic blanket, her true support system, her real home. Liam settled onto the grass beside her. Are you happy? Yeah, she breathed. I really am. 5 years ago, you were crashing on my spare futon with plaster dust in your hair. It feels like it happened to a different person. That is because you are a completely different architect. Eleanor shook her head. No, I am the same person I have always been. I just finally found the right foundation to build on. Marcus approached, Leo running ahead to show Eleanor a perfectly smooth rock he'd found. After Leo ran back to Sarah, Marcus hesitated. He is a great kid, he said. He is. You did that. You are raising him to be curious and kind and brave. We are all doing it together, Eleanor replied gently. All of us. Can I ask you something? Marcus waited for her to nod. Do you ever regret it? Leaving all of that behind? Eleanor looked at Leo laughing with Sarah, at Liam talking with his husband, at Daniel sketching in a notebook. at this life she had rebuilt from the ground up, based on trust and community, not for a single second. I regret that it had to happen, but I will never regret the choice I made. I do, Marcus said quietly. I regret every single thing I did that made you believe you had no other option. I know. But you are different now, too, and that has to count for something. Leo called out, Mama, Dad, Liam, come look. They walked over together to their messy, beautiful, wonderful family. Two fathers for Leo, both of whom had earned that title through their love and actions. A mother who had designed her own escape, and a village that had chosen to become a family. The fog rolled in from the Pacific, painting the marine headlands in tones of silver and rose. Eleanor felt a profound sense of calm she had never known in the San Francisco penthouse, with its panoramic city views. This was real, imperfect, and solid, a life she had designed and built herself. Daniel caught her eye from across the lawn and raised his glass of iced tea in a silent salute. To women who draw their own damn blueprints. To communities that show up. To second chances that are built, not just given. Eleanor raised her own glass in return. To courage. To choosing integrity over image. To walking away when it is the only path that leads you back to yourself. The distant sound of a foghorn mixed with Leo's laughter in the cool evening air, and Eleanor Vance, formerly Mrs. Marcus Thorne, finally knew she was home. The next morning, Eleanor stood in her sunlit office, carefully unrolling a fragile, century-old blueprint. The early light poured through the large bay windows overlooking the main street of Sausalito, the same street she had once walked down feeling completely lost. She had built so much since then. Her project board was full. 3 historic building consultations, 2 grant proposals for community projects, and 1 woman who needed help escaping a picture-perfect prison. This was the work she was always meant to do, the woman she was always meant to be. The bell on the front door jingled. A woman entered, maybe 30, with a faint bruise on her cheek that her hair didn't quite cover, and a small boy clutching her leg. Eleanor recognized that expression, the fear warring with a fierce determination, the way she held her son like a shield, the deep-seated exhaustion that comes from living in a state of constant fear. "Can I help you?" Eleanor asked kindly. The woman's voice was barely a whisper. "I need to start over. I need a new life, but I have no idea where to even begin." Eleanor walked to a bookshelf behind her desk and took down a small, framed piece of paper, her own simple checklist from 5 years ago, the one she'd scribbled on the back of a cocktail napkin before leaving Marcus's penthouse. Encrypted drive, burner phone, P.O. box, cash savings, new bank. She showed it to the woman. "This was my first draft 5 years ago. It worked." The woman stared at the list, then at the bright, successful architecture firm around her, at the life Eleanor had so clearly rebuilt. "You actually did it." Eleanor gestured to everything. Her business license on the wall, photos of Leo on her desk. "I am here, am I not? Can you help me?" "That is precisely why I am here." Eleanor pulled out a fresh sheet of drafting paper, the same kind she'd used to sketch out her own new life. "Let us start with your foundation. First, what is your name?" "Sophie." "Sophie Miller." Ava began to outline a plan, years of professional expertise and personal history merging into a roadmap to freedom. "Okay, Sophie, let us draw you a new blueprint." For the next 2 hours, Eleanor walked Sophie through every single step. Secure communication methods, cash-based work that would not create a paper trail, community networks for safe housing, and the documents needed for a fresh start. Coastal towns with deep roots, quiet strength, and lives lived on their own terms. "The first day is always the hardest part of any journey," Clara said. "You'll second-guess the path a million times." But you're not erasing your history. You're editing it. You're moving toward a safe harbor, toward the person you were always meant to be. Maya clutched her son's hand. What if he comes after us? Then you'll have an entire fleet of us to guard the harbor. That's the deal. You plot the course, but you find out pretty quickly you're not sailing alone. Clara slid a folder across the table. This is your chart. Contact info for aid groups, safe houses in 2 different states, employment agencies, and my personal cell. You can signal me anytime, day or night. How can I ever repay you for this? You don't. Someone else gave me a map when I was lost. Now I'm just passing it on. After Maya left, Clara lingered at her heavy driftwood desk, feeling the tide of her own past pull at her. 5 years ago, she had been the one on the other side of a table, desperate for an escape route. Now, she provided them. The story was coming full circle. Leo came into the room with a steaming mug of coffee. Another castaway? Yes. She has my eyes. Afraid, but determined. You're doing good work, Clara. I'm doing the work I was always meant to do. That evening, Clara went to Sam's school's end-of-year bonfire. The beach was alive with their chosen family. Leo and his brother David, Isabel and her wife with little Finn, Daniel with his ever-present sketchbook, and Marcus with his new partner Eleanor, both groaning in sympathy when Sam's elaborate sand sculpture of a lighthouse was washed away by a rogue wave. Everyone cheered anyway, including Sam, who found the sudden collapse hilarious. Clara's heart swelled, watching her son live a childhood so different from the one Marcus would have engineered in San Francisco. Here, Sam was allowed to be messy, to build things that didn't last, to just be a boy. After the bonfire, they all got saltwater taffy. Sam stood between his 2 fathers, calculating his odds for a second piece. Papa Leo, can we have one more? Leo laughed. That's a question for your mom. Mom says one is more than enough, Clara said, smiling. Sam turned to Marcus, his eyes wide and pleading. Dad, can you override her? Marcus looked at Clara, and for a moment, they were a united team. Nice try, kiddo. One piece. Sam sighed with theatrical despair. Well, you can't blame a guy for trying. Later, as they walked toward the parking lot, Marcus slowed his pace to match Clara's. Thank you, he said, his voice quiet. You say that every time you're here. You really don't have to. I'm not thanking you for being civil, he said. I'm thanking you for teaching me what a real legacy is. Clara stopped. What do you mean? This. Marcus motioned to the group, walking ahead. Sam and Finn making ghost noises in the dark. Leo and Eleanor chatting about tide pools. David and Daniel debating the merits of different kinds of wood for boat repair. You created this. A family built on trust and mutual support. I was raised on acquisitions and mergers. You showed me what a real community looks like. It took me a long time to find the right materials myself. But you did. And you didn't just rescue yourself and Sam. You rescued me. By leaving, you made me confront the man I'd become. I don't think I ever properly said thank you for that. You've thanked me by becoming a father Sam can look up to. That's all that matters. That night, tucking Sam into bed in their cozy apartment above the print shop, with its mismatched furniture and the smell of ink and old books, Clara felt a richness that no stock portfolio could ever offer. Sam was safe, loved, and happy. The bills were paid. Tomorrow, she'd help another woman draft a new life story. David would fix the sticking door in the shop. They would have dinner with friends. It was simple and true, and it was everything. Mommy, Sam murmured sleepily, tell me the story again. Which one, my love? The one about when you were a Queen's librarian? Clara smiled, smoothing his hair. Once upon a time, there was a woman who was in charge of a king's entire library. She lived in a steel and glass castle, in a city by a great bay, but her own story felt like it was written in invisible ink. Then she learned a new story was growing inside her, and she knew she had to find a safer place to write it. So one morning, before the fog lifted, she walked out of the castle and drove up the coast to find a place where their story could truly begin. And she found Cannon Beach, Sam finished, knowing the tale by heart. She found Cannon Beach, and Aunt Isabel, and Uncle David, and Papa Leo, and later, Dad Marcus found them too, and he learned how to build better things in his own life. I'm glad you wrote a new story, Mommy. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. After Sam was asleep, Clara stood by the window. She looked out at the main street, the weathered cedar-shingled buildings, the quiet Oregon town that had become her sanctuary. Her phone vibrated with a text from Maya. I did it. I filed the papers. I'm terrified, but I'm free. Thank you. Clara wrote back. You are the author of an amazing story. And when you're ready, you'll help the next person who needs to write their own. That's how our library grows. That's how we win. She thought about the woman she had been 5 years ago. Clara Sterling, the brilliant archivist for a pharmaceutical magnate, living in a penthouse prison and being systematically deleted from her own narrative. She had thought that leaving was an admission of defeat. Now she knew it was the most important story she would ever tell. Leaving isn't always about tearing out the pages. Sometimes it's the only way to find the original draft. Clara had walked away from the corporate grants, from the high society galas, from the life everyone in San Francisco assumed she wanted. In doing so, she'd found the real narrative. A purpose, a community, a love not based on net worth, and a life authored by her, for her. The past was a chapter she couldn't erase. Marcus would always be the man who had maintained a secret, second family. But the future was a blank page, and she was filling it one day, one person, one woman at a time. She was teaching them what she had learned in the darkest hours of that drive up the Pacific Coast Highway. You are more powerful than you know. You deserve to tell your own story. You deserve to be the main character. And if you have to burn the whole library down to save the most important book, then light the match. Run toward what is true. Run toward yourself. And when you get there, a new cast of characters will be waiting. A gallery owner with a spare room, a friend who sees your real value, a man who shows up with clam chowder on a rainy night, a town that offers shelter without needing to read your previous chapters. You don't have to be Mrs. Sterling to be complete. You just have to be you. Clara Vance, formerly Clara Sterling, turned from the window and went to bed. Tomorrow, she would help a local tribe apply for a grant to archive their oral histories. Tonight, she would sleep deeply in a home that was hers alone, in a life she had written from scratch, with a son who was happy and whole. The pregnant wife had vanished from the society pages, but the woman she had become, she was just getting to the good part. 5 years to the day after Clara Sterling disappeared from San Francisco, Clara Vance sat on a log at a Cannon Beach bonfire, watching her son Sam roast marshmallows with his friend Finn. The salty air was crisp, promising the kind of clear Oregon night that made you believe in new beginnings. Isabel sat down beside her, still vibrant at 78, her hands busy weaving a basket from beach grass. Lost in thought, just thinking about anniversaries. It's been 5 years today. Any regrets? Clara watched Sam laugh as his marshmallow caught fire and he dramatically blew it out. He immediately put a new one on his stick, completely unfazed. Not a single one. Good. Because that young woman you helped last year, Maria, she called me from Santa Fe yesterday. She's safe. Her little pottery studio is open. She wanted me to say thank you. Clara smiled. Tell her to send me a picture in a year. Let me see her shelves full of her own work. That's the only thank you I need. In the last 5 years, Clara had helped 27 women write new chapters. 27 women who had come to her, feeling like a footnote in someone else's story, and left with a plan, with fresh courage, with the knowledge that someone understood. She kept a secure digital archive, with only their first names and the dates they started over, a catalog of their bravery, their strength, and the quiet network for women escaping gilded cages. Some wrote back to thank her, some she never heard from again, and that was success. That was the point. They had become someone else, somewhere else, just as she had. Her independent press had thrived. She'd brought on 2 partners, both women with their own stories of leaving the corporate world behind. Leo managed their distribution, his lifetime of navigating coastal routes perfect for their 47 active historical preservation projects. They specialized in archival consulting, grant writing for cultural nonprofits, and what they privately called narrative reconstruction. Marcus had once called it Clara's Rebellion. She called it Paying It Forward. Leo walked across the beach from his boat, now a renowned restorer of wooden vessels. Finn trailed him, 11 years old, and already a talented photographer. Their wedding had been a simple affair 2 years ago, held in a sun-drenched coastal garden with their daughter Cora, scattering petals. Now, Rowan set a plate down in front of Isla, kissing the top of her head. "Dinner is served," he announced. "Your dad called. He's flying in next week." Robert, now 70 and retired from his career as a civil engineer, visited every few months. He and Rowan bonded over woodworking projects, 2 steady men connected by a quiet competence. Did he say for how long? A full 10 days. He wants to be here for Cora's art show at school. Cora, hearing this, came bounding in, her clothes a masterpiece of paint smudges and happiness. "Grandpa Robert is coming. Will he show me how to build another birdhouse?" Isla smiled. "I have a feeling he will show you how to build a whole bird condominium." They made their way back to the cottage, the beautiful, cobbled-together family they had created. It was unconventional and sometimes chaotic, but it was theirs. Real and vibrant and overflowing with love. That afternoon, Marcus arrived to pick up Cora for the weekend. He had moved to a sleek condo down the coast in Monterey, having sold the San Francisco penthouse. Serafina was a distant memory, and he was engaged to someone new. They were adopting a son. In a move that had stunned Isla, they had asked her and Rowan to be the boy's guardians in their will. "Ready, sweet pea?" Marcus asked Cora. "Can I bring my sketchbook, Daddy? I want to show you my design for a new treehouse." Marcus glanced at Isla, who offered a small, encouraging smile. "Absolutely. Just give me a call when you're settled in." "Thank you," Cora said, her voice full of practiced seriousness. Isla watched the luxury sedan pull away, her daughter secure in the knowledge that her world was supported by many pillars of love, understanding that family was about who showed up, not just who you were born to. "You okay?" Rowan asked, slipping his arm around her. Isla took a deep, cleansing breath. "Yeah, just admiring the new landscape of my life. A good landscape? Completely breathtaking." That night, Isla was the keynote speaker for a new program at a community college. It offered scholarships in horticulture for women transitioning out of shelters. The greenhouse project had been running for a year. It was a stunning place, filled with the scent of damp earth and blooming jasmine, with long potting benches that fostered collaboration. Diana was in attendance, the project's main benefactor, observing the program she had funded. She and Isla would never be close, but they had established a respectful peace. Diana was making amends, rebuilding her own life, one donation at a time. "Thank you all for being here," Isla began, addressing the group of women gathered in the main conservatory of the greenhouse. 5 years ago, I was in a place much like you are now. Terrified, lost, and certain that any move I made would shatter my world. She shared a version of her story, omitting the details that would identify her as the ex-wife of a famous venture capitalist, providing only the foundational truth. A marriage that looked like a pristine architectural model, but was actually a glass box. A pregnancy that became the catalyst for her escape, and a drive down the coast that led to a total reinvention. I'm not going to say it was easy. Those first few months in Carmel were the hardest of my life. My money ran out. I felt like I was drowning every single night. I questioned every single decision, Isla confessed. But I kept planting. I grew herbs in tiny pots on a rented windowsill, and I found people who gave me light. A cafe owner who had a room for rent, a retired botanist who became my mentor, a coastal town that decided to let me take root. A young woman raised a shaky hand. How did you know it was the right thing to do? I didn't, not for a long time. But then my daughter was born, and I held her and knew I would rather be an independent landscape designer with dirt under my nails than a silent feature in a minimalist penthouse. I would rather struggle to cultivate something real than be comfortable and ornamental. What if he tries to find you? Another woman whispered. Then you have a network of roots so deep he can't pull you out. You have legal resources. You have an entire community of women who have walked this path and are thriving on the other side. You are not alone. That is the most important lesson I learned. You are not alone. After her speech, women clustered around her with questions, with quiet thank yous, with fragments of their own stories. Isla listened to everyone, offering advice, connecting them to resources, and sharing her own journey of hope. She vividly remembered being the one on the other side, the frightened woman asking if escape was even possible. Now, she was the proof. Yes, leaving is possible. A new life is possible. You are possible. At 11 p.m., Isla drove home, the winding coastal highway dark, the Pacific a vast, breathing presence beside her. She thought about all the versions of herself she had been. The hopeful artist who believed in creating living beauty, the young wife who thought their partnership was a co-designed garden, the ghost of a steel and glass home whose own wild nature was being systematically pruned away, the woman hiding in a small cottage, terrified but determined, the mother who gave birth during a winter storm, the designer who rebuilt her world from soil, water, and sunlight. All of those women were still part of her, the fragile seedlings and the resilient old growth, the broken pathways and the final, thriving garden. She was a landscape of resilience, a collection of hard-won seasons, a testament to the power of clearing the land and planting something new. At home, her husband, Rowan, was awake, sketching a design for a new trellis. He looked up as she came in. How did it go? It was good. Painful, but good. You're changing the world, Idla. I'm just showing them they already have the seeds. They're the ones who have to do the planting. Rowan pulled her into a warm embrace. You are truly incredible, Isla Vance. She smiled, hearing her name. Isla Vance. Not the wife of a financier, not Mrs. Anyone. Just herself, reclaimed and replanted and free. I'm just a woman who left a barren place. Yes, Rowan said softly, and that is the most beautiful thing in the world. There is. That night, Isla dreamt of a vast, ancient forest, of roots that spoke to one another underground, of sunlight filtering through a canopy 1,000 years old. She dreamt of the planet shrinking to a single, perfect seed in her hand, of a woman becoming a whisper of pollen on the wind, then taking root to grow into a spectacular, unknown flower. She dreamt of moss that smelled of rain and time, of intricately carved wooden animals for a child's room, and of a future built on the undeniable truth of the natural world. She dreamt of all the forgotten female botanists she admired, their names finally given to the species they discovered, cataloging, cultivating, proving, and finally being honored. And she dreamt of a landscape plan she had sketched on the back of a divorce settlement, a hidden design. I am gone. The original foundation was unstable. The most powerful blueprint she had ever drawn, the lines that set her free. That morning, 7 months pregnant, Isla felt a sharp kick. At 34, she was a rising star in landscape architecture. "Easy there, little one," she whispered, a hand resting on her stomach. Her husband, Marcus, a titan of venture capital, handed her a mug of tea. "Heard you landed the Greystone account," he said, kissing her hair, his voice the smooth, confident purr of a luxury car. "The final renderings are processing now. We should have the full 3D model by this afternoon." They stood on the terrace of their San Francisco penthouse, a perfect portrait of success. It was a life built on design and ambition. After Marcus left for his financial district office, Isla went to work on the terrace's new smart garden system, the same winding path of cables she'd first laid out weeks ago, full of excitement, with a new life to build. Now she was an acclaimed designer, a wife, and soon a mother who would give her child a world of beauty. On her tablet, she pulled up the central home server to sync the garden's network. An automated script began to run. A simple status window appeared, syncing irrigation controller, accessing server. Today their home was supposed to become a little more alive. The system, a gift from Marcus, to showcase his firm's smart home investments, connected seamlessly. But then, a directory caught her eye. Not garden_lighting, but project_Nightingale. Thinking it was a new ecotech investment, she opened it. But inside were not pitch decks, but travel receipts. Not data models, but hotel reservations for Miami. A recurring name, Serafina, a partner at a rival firm, was on every booking. Marcus had sent an accidental sync request from his phone, creating an unencrypted mirror of a hidden folder. "Are you sure you know the landscape of your marriage?" Isla looked at the garden plans, now overlaid with a blueprint of deceit, and knew exactly what she had to do. Yes, the truth can be cultivated. Freedom can be cultivated. You can be cultivated. And if you have to perform a controlled burn on your old life to enrich the soil for a new one, then you strike the match. I will show you how. The final file in the folder finished downloading. It was an audio recording. Serafina, her voice a mix of arrogance and anger, on a call with a colleague. Isla pressed play. "He's not who he pretends to be," Serafina said. "It's not just the affair. He's using our intel to sabotage companies." 2 years later, the new community garden in Portland had never been so full. They had set up chairs on the lawns, every bench was taken, and a crowd spilled out onto the sidewalk. The Chronicle had sent their lifestyle editor, and even a famous landscape architect was there, sitting in the front row. Isla walked to the podium. Model. 7 months pregnant with her first child, her hands rested on her belly as Elena faced the crowd. Her new partner, a quiet documentary filmmaker named Liam, sat in the front row with her younger brother, Alex, who was now 28, and her mentor from grad school, Dr. Anya Sharma, who was 63. Her ex-husband, Victor, and his legal team were not there. They were preoccupied with federal investigations. Her old colleague, Sarah, and her research partner, Damien, sat beside her family like proud guardians. Elena had even flown her mother in from Phoenix, who was watching with tears in her eyes. The banner behind Elena announced, "The Aquar Institute Grand Opening, Pioneering Ethical Marine Genetics." "Thank you all for being here," Elena began. 9 years ago, I arrived in Seattle with a scholarship and a suitcase full of research papers. I was living in student housing. I had no idea if I would ever successfully sequence the genomes I'd set out to study. If I would ever get a research chair, or if I had just chosen a field with no place for me. She paused, her eyes scanning the packed auditorium. She spotted young women she had mentored scattered through the audience. There was Anya from 3 years ago, now a leading researcher at Scripps, who had flown in that morning just to be there. There were others she didn't know by name, but who knew her story. Women who had heard about the geneticist in Seattle, whose own husband's fraudulent data revealed his crimes. I'm standing here tonight because people helped me. Anya gave me a research grant. Damien gave me a chance. Liam gave me a blueprint for a new life. This city gave me a new ocean to explore, and I want to spend the rest of my life paying that truth forward. The Equor Institute planned to do more than just study marine life. A portion of all its funding would go toward pro bono legal help for scientists fighting to protect their research from corporate malpractice. It would also fund scholarships to help young women enter STEM fields. It would provide mentorship, ethics training, and mental health resources. Everything Elena had wished for. Everything she had been forced to learn on her own. We are naming our very first grant after someone who taught me a very painful lesson, Elena went on, that people who seem to have everything can still be morally bankrupt. That a press release is not the same as accountability. That sometimes the people who try to own your world can become the very reason you discover a new one, but only if you refuse to accept their version of reality. She glanced at a photo on the screen behind her, not of Victor, but of the woman who had flagged the corrupted data file. He had not known she would be part of the presentation. The Olivia Vance Grant will fund whistleblower protection and digital security education for women in the biotech industry, because I have learned that compromised people compromise others, and free people free other people. Olivia's eyes were shining with tears from the third row. She mouthed the words, "Thank you," from across the room. After the speeches, after the sparkling cider, and the endless stream of congratulations, Elena found herself alone on the Institute's rooftop terrace, gazing out at the Seattle skyline. The city lights were just starting to glitter against Puget Sound. Liam appeared beside her. They hadn't spoken about Victor in almost a year, though Elena had been following the legal proceedings closely. Liam looked steady, solid, and real. "I heard about the grant," Liam said. "That was a class act." "It wasn't about class. It was about accuracy. Victor isn't the monster in my story. He was just a brilliant man who believed that owning the clinical trials meant he owned the truth. The real monster was the system that rewarded his ambition, and the one that taught me my own worth was tied to his name. We're trying to fix that system." "I enabled that system," Victor confessed, his voice hollow over the phone. "I saw you as a brilliant asset, not as a scientist about to have my child. I've said this to my lawyers, I know, but I feel compelled to say it to you again. I am so profoundly sorry." Elena watched the city lights, processing the change. "Are you telling the truth now?" Victor was quiet for a moment. "I don't have a company with my name on it. I'm not giving keynote speeches at any pharma conferences. But I'm testifying about the regulatory loopholes that allowed me to do what I did. I helped the FDA draft a new data integrity rule last year. So, yes, I believe I am. For the very first time, I truly believe I am." "Good," Elena said. "That's all the universe ever asks of anyone." They stood in a moment of quiet, static-filled understanding, the continent sprawling between them. "Can I ask a question?" Victor ventured. "Do you ever miss it? The penthouse overlooking the city? The private yacht? Any of it?" Elena chuckled softly. "Not for a single second. I miss the woman I was before I became Mrs. Sterling, the driven young student who saw patterns in DNA nobody else could. And she's finally back. But she's stronger now. She has a daughter on the way, and a partner who loves to hear about gene sequencing. She has colleagues who champion her. She has work that reveals the truth. That woman has no need for a penthouse. From her new small house, a voice called out, "Elena, Liam says the crib assembly instructions look like ancient hieroglyphics." Elena smiled. "I should go. My partner has a deep and abiding fear of Allen keys." "Elena," Victor said, stopping her, "thank you for proving there was a way to build something real instead of just being the first to market." "You're the one who has to do the work," Elena replied. "I just showed you the data was corrupted." 3 months later, Elena gave birth to her daughter on a clear autumn morning. In stark contrast to the turbulent discovery that preceded her, Aurora, Rory Hayes, was born in calm, surrounded by affection, in a hospital room with a view of the Olympic Mountains. Liam held his daughter for the first time, tears openly tracing paths down his cheeks. Alex, brought in to meet his little niece, was uncharacteristically solemn, touching her impossibly small fingers with reverence. "She's so tiny," he breathed. You were that tiny once, too," Elena told him, her own voice thick with unshed tears. "Did you love me this much back then?" "Even more," she whispered back. "I loved you so much I charted a whole new genome to keep you safe." Alex mulled that over. "Because love is about discovery. Yes, my sweet brother. Love is about discovery." Olivia visited the next day, bringing not flowers, but a small, beautifully framed image of bioluminescent phytoplankton. "I wanted her to have her first glimpse of home," she said quietly. Liam helped me pick the frame. Elena was momentarily speechless. "It's perfect." Olivia sat carefully in the chair next to her bed. "I never had this with him. A chance to be honest, to see who someone really was right from the start. I was absent for all of it. I'm sure that's something you regret." "Don't apologize," he stated, his voice unwavering. "That was a consequence I fully earned. But I am endlessly thankful that you've let me back into his world." He looked down at the slumbering Theo. "He has your resolve." "He has his sister's name for his middle name," Olivia replied quietly. "Theo Rory." "Elena supported me when everything was falling apart. She revealed the truth about your trial data, knowing it could mean losing you forever. That took incredible strength. Our son deserved a name that embodied that kind of courage." "Thank you," Victor whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "For everything. For leaving me. For standing up to me. For making me confront the man I had become." "You did the hardest thing," she said. "You chose to really see yourself. Most people never bother." Later, after Victor had gone and their friend Liam had taken Alex home for the night, Olivia sat with her son in the quiet room. She recalled the woman she was 8 years ago, pregnant and terrified, discovering a hidden folder of falsified patient outcomes on a server in their stark, minimalist, Manhattan high-rise. That woman couldn't have imagined this. A son, born into a world of truth. A co-parent who saw her as a true equal. A career that gave her purpose. A community that had her back. "Your sister was born in the middle of a skyscraper of lies," Olivia murmured to the sleeping baby. "You were born into a garden of peace. That's the change 8 years can bring. That's what happens when you find the courage to redraw your own blueprints." 5 years later, Theo was 13, Rory was 5, and Elena was 43 when the editor from a top science journal reached out. She wanted to do a feature on innovators who challenge the giants of the pharmaceutical world, telling the story of the geneticist who outplayed a pharma mogul to protect her research and public health. Elena's story, reframed for a new audience, would be the main feature. "I have to think about it," Elena told her. That night, she phoned Victor. They operated like this now, Two seasoned generals coordinating Theo's science fair project and Rory's upcoming soccer schedule with the practiced ease of modern co-parenting. A major journal wants to do a big story, she informed him, about whistleblowers, about what happened. What are your thoughts? I think it could inspire a lot of people. But I'm also afraid it could paint a target on your back again, on all of us. Are they planning to use your old name, Dr. Elena Sterling? Elena was quiet for a long moment. I haven't been Elena Sterling in 13 years. I barely remember how she felt. She felt brilliant, Victor said softly. And caged. Always so caged, even when she was winning awards. Dr. Elena Hayes doesn't feel caged. No, he agreed. She feels free. Elena agreed to the article, but only if she could control the narrative and guarantee her family's privacy. The editor consented. For 6 months, the documentary crew followed Alara, charting the rise of her medical ethics foundation, interviewing the doctors she had shielded, and highlighting the network of journalists and patient advocates she had cultivated. The resulting series, titled The Unseen Variable, became a cultural phenomenon. It secured a major broadcast award and ignited a fierce national debate about pharmaceutical fraud, the immense pressure on whistleblowers, and the ways in which a partner's reputation can be used as a cage. Ilara watched the social media storm from the living room of her quiet Seattle home, her children close by. After the initial wave of attention subsided, Liam, now 15, looked over at her. "You have so much courage, Mom." "I was just terrified," Ilara answered softly. "But I knew what I had to do. That's what courage really is, being scared to death and doing it anyway." Maya, now 7 and fiercely curious, declared, "When I grow up, I'm going to be a scientist who discovers new cures and always tells the truth, just like you." Ilara wrapped her daughter in a warm embrace. "You can be absolutely anyone you want to be in this world. That's the entire point. The formula is yours to write." A decade after the scandal, the story of Ilara Vance's escape was a cautionary tale in biotech circles. The brilliant researcher who vanished with her son. The biotech mogul whose empire imploded before he remade himself as a champion for transparent research. The investigative journalist who risked his career to expose the cover-up. The reality was quieter and more complex than the rumors. Dr. Alara Hayes, age 45, was the head of one of the nation's most respected medical ethics foundations. Her organization had provided anonymous support and legal resources to over 400 scientists and healthcare professionals. The film rights to her life story had been sold. Julian Croft, age 51, had started a nonprofit that independently audited clinical trials for underfunded researchers. He divided his time between Seattle and Boston, guiding his new mission, but no longer obsessed with dominating the industry. He had dinner with Liam every Wednesday. He saw Maya every weekend. He had married his new partner, Isabel, in a quiet garden ceremony and appeared to be genuinely content. David Chen, age 42, was now a senior editor for a major online news outlet. He never married or had children, but he found his calling in dismantling the very corporate PR systems he once navigated. He and Alara were not close, but they were allies, bound by a shared history. David sent Alara a secure message once a year on the anniversary of the data leak. The subject line never changed, the day the data broke, and her old university mentor, Dr. Anya Sharma, now 82, served on her foundation's advisory council. Ben, her former lab partner, who now co-directed the foundation with Alara's support, had penned a memoir called The Placebo Effect. The Lies. We're Told to Feel Safe. It immediately became a #1 bestseller. Maria, now married to her longtime girlfriend and a mother of 2 adopted daughters, managed the foundation's intricate logistics, ensuring every case was handled with precision and care. She and Alara were inseparable, raising their children together, their bond forged in a shared battle for the truth. Julian Croft continued to build his new legacy, a more reflective and subdued man than the world had once known. He had personally endowed over 200 science scholarships for students from the communities his old company's practices had once endangered. Each one was a small attempt at penance. On the 10th anniversary of her escape, Alara stood on a ferry deck crossing Puget Sound, a route where she had once soothed a baby Liam to sleep. She had taken the day for herself, needing to process the milestone in solitude, to acknowledge the woman she was forced to become and the one she had painstakingly built. Her thoughts drifted back to that night 10 years prior, copying terabytes of falsified trial data from a hidden server in their cold, minimalist penthouse, the sickening dread and fragile hope as the unmarked car arrived, hiding in a small suburban apartment, the quiet support of a retired physician, and giving birth to Liam during a historic Pacific Northwest ice storm. Every choice had led her to this moment. Her secure phone buzzed. It was a notification from a contact she didn't recognize. The encrypted message appeared on her tablet. The sender's name was hidden, but her panic was palpable. My husband is Simon Wexler, the AI developer. The whole tech world sees him as a visionary, but they don't know the man he is at home. I'm 32 weeks pregnant, and I need to get out. I found your contact on a private forum for ethical engineers. A cryptic post about a scientist who can help you rewrite your personal code. Can you help me? In her calm Seattle office, surrounded by genetic sequencing models, Alara's fingers hovered over the screen. Her reply was swift and coded. We have lab time open Thursday at 11 a.m. Your new protocol is ready. You are not the first, and you will be protected. She looked out at the Seattle skyline, a horizon of ambition built of concrete and light. It mirrored the strength of the women she helped. The world had largely forgotten the story of the scientist who vanished from her powerful husband's world. But the woman she had become never stopped engineering escape routes, and she continued to sequence a path to freedom for others, desperate for a new life. The woman once known as Alara Vance was a variable from a discarded experiment. In her place stood a constant, a protector, and her life was a testament to every woman who dared to delete the old data and code her own future.